Good morning.
Good morning. Dina, are you facilitate, or are you our host?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mayor.
Are we ready to go?
I am just looking for the interpreters to hop online, and I have not seen them. If we can give them another moment, I'm going to check their status.
Okay.
I like Tony's background. It looks like a whole bunch of donuts. I know it's fire symbols, but I prefer to think of them as donuts. I just hope I don't get hungry.
Everyone loves donuts.
And firefighters, so you know, what are you gonna do?
Hover over your microphone.
Please remember to mute your microphones at council chambers. Mayor, I just need one more moment. The interpreters are having just a problem connecting. It'll be just another 2 minutes. So my apologies for the inconvenience.
No worries, just let me know when we're ready to roll.
Thank you, Pablo. I see that you've joined the panel. Can you please do a quick mic check to make sure your mic is working?
Good morning, everyone. This is Pablo Rodas, IC Spanish interpreter.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to just rename you with interpreter in front of your name.
Great.
And double checking that Xiomara is logging on too shortly.
Okay, yeah, she should be logging on soon. I sent her the link as well.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Xiomara. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. We're just going to pop the interpreters into place, and it'll take just a moment.
Thank you.
I'm gonna do this, stop the screen share so the members of the public can see the panel today. One moment, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Xiomara, I have put you into the Spanish channel. Can you please turn on your camera and just give me a visual thumbs up that you are connected to the Spanish channel? Perfect. Thank you, Xiomara. And just to confirm, we do have interpreters available on the line, and interpreter Pablo will be maintaining his spot on the panelist side to help assist translation for public comment. Mayor, again, I apologize for the delay, and we are good to go with interpreters.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Well, welcome everyone to the September 25th Public Safety Subcommittee meeting. Call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. Councilmember Sawyer,
Here.
Vice Mayor Fleming,
Here.
and Mayor Schwedhelm.
Here.
Thank you. All members are available.
Okay, interpreter services are being provided in Spanish for today's meeting. Can our Zoom host explain how that will work?
Servicios de interpretación van a ser proveídos en español para la reunión de hoy día. ¿Puede el hósped de esta reunión explicar cómo va a funcionar?
Thank you. Live interpretation can be heard on the Spanish channel. You can join the Spanish channel by clicking on the interpretation icon in the Zoom toolbar. It looks like a globe at the bottom of your screen.
Invitación en vivo puede ser escuchada a través del canal de español. Usted puede unirse al canal de español por haciendo un clic en el icono en la barra de herramientas en Zoom. Se mira como un globo.
Thank you. Live interpretation will be heard on the Spanish channel, and at agenda item 3, public comment, the interpreter on the panel will be prepared to assist anyone needing interpretation. Additionally, additional instruction will be given at agenda item 3 for public comment. And Mayor, back to you for the remainder of the housekeeping items for today's meeting.
Thank you. For John and Victoria, just a reminder to keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking. Staff will remain muted until needing to speak. As members of the public join the meeting, you'll be participating as an attendee. Your microphone and camera will be muted. Only today's panelists will be viewed during the meeting. If you're calling in from a telephone and choose to speak during the public comments portion of today's agenda, for privacy concerns, the host will be renaming your viewable phone number to resident and the last 4 digits of your phone number. Madam City Clerk, could you explain how public comments will be heard at today's meeting?
Yes. At each agenda item, the item is presented. The mayor will ask for council comments and then open it up for public comment. The host in Zoom will be lowering all hands until public comment is open for the agenda item. Once the mayor has called for public comment, the mayor will announce the public to raise their hand if they wish to speak on the specific agenda item. If you are calling in to listen to the meeting audibly, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. The host will then call on the public who have raised their hands. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and a timer will appear on the screen for council and public to see. Once all live public comments have been heard, the meeting host will play voicemail public comments. If you provide a live public comment on an agenda item, but also submitted an e-comment, email, or recorded voice message public comment, your email, e-comment, or voice message public comment will not be duplicated, read, or played during the meeting. Additionally, there is one public comment period today on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda public matters, item 3. This is a time when any person may address the council on matters not listed on this agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Mayor?
Thank you, Liz. Can you also explain how the Spanish translation feature will work?
There is a Spanish channel icon in the Zoom meeting, and the public may participate on that channel. Interpreters are participating in Zoom and will be translating the meeting on the Spanish channel. During the public comment period, we'll step in to assist translation of public comment. Per the Brown Act, an additional 3 minutes will be added to the timer to accommodate the translation. Mayor?
Thank you. We're now taking public comments on item 3, non-agenda matters. This is the time when any person may address the council on matters not listed on this agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Madam Host, would you facilitate public comment for item 3 of this agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, as Liz just stated, a countdown timer is now on the screen for the convenience of the speaker and the participants. The speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please be sure to unmute your mic when you're invited to do so. Your microphone will be muted at the end of the countdown. Mayor, I'm seeing no hands raised for public comment. Again, there's no hands being raised for public comment, nor were there any email public comments, voice message public comments, or e-comments provided for non-agenda matters.
All right, thank you. On to item 4, approval of the minutes. Did the two of you get an opportunity to look at the August 7th, 2020 draft minutes? And if so, were there any corrections, additions, deletions?
I did have an opportunity to review the minutes, and although lengthy, they appeared to be accurate as far as my memory serves, and I'd be willing to accept them as given.
I'm with John on that one.
All right, thank you. And I do appreciate the minutes. That they were very detailed. I had to leave the meeting at 1 o'clock, and it was very helpful, the level of detail. So we will accept the minutes as submitted. On to item 5, new business. Chief Gosner, are you going to be introducing this item 5.1?
I am, thank you. Mayor and everyone, thank you for this opportunity. It's great to be here. We have two items that the fire department is going to present today. The first item is the Santa Rosa Fire Department Recruitment and Diversity Strategic Plan. This is a plan that we've been working on for the last year and a half, maybe a little bit longer, and it is finally here. So we're very happy to present that. Deputy Chief Scott Westrop will be presenting that plan. And then our second item is the Santa Rosa Fire Department Vegetation Management Plan. There's been a lot of work in the last few months on this front as well, and we're very excited to get that started. Fire Marshal Scott Moon and Assistant Fire Marshal Paul Lowenthal will be delivering that presentation. Of course, all of us will be available at the end of every presentation for any questions that you may have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott Westrop. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor, and Councilmember Sawyer. Scott Westrop, Deputy Fire Chief for the City of Santa Rosa Fire Department. Today we'll be presenting the Santa Rosa Fire Department Recruitment and Diversity Strategic Plan. I'll refer to it to the plan from here on out, as it's a little bit of a mouthful getting that out every time. So we're proud of this plan and excited to present it to you today. Next slide, please. So, as the chief referenced, over the last several years, we've identified some significant gaps in our recruitment and retention. It's never a problem that the fire department really had to deal with before. And we noticed that there was a significant issue in 2 areas. Number one was the general number of recruits we were getting in the entry-level positions in the fire department. And at the same time, we also recognize there's significant gaps in the diversity of the organization. And we'd really like that to better match the diversity of our community. So we saw this as an opportunity to tackle both issues at the same time with one plan. And so we're really excited about rolling this out and digging into it. It's been a long time coming. It started out as a white paper, an internal white paper, concept paper, and it turned into this plan that's now for public consumption. We feel it's a broad approach that instills short, medium, and long-term strategies to effectively make a long-term investment into the community in order to attract, hire, retain a local diverse talent pool. Keep in mind as we go through this that this report looks specifically at the firefighter paramedic rank, which is our entry-level position in the firefighter suppression side of things, but it translates very easily into all the bureaus across the fire department. And quite frankly, it translates to the entire fire service in general, as you'll see that there's gaps throughout the fire service in general. And so while we may not be, the initial intent is to attract and hire and retain within the Santa Rosa Fire Department. We're very happy to help the fire service in general in their diversity numbers. So moving on to the next slide, please. So we're going to start with some general statistics on where we're at right now as an organization and the fire service in general, and give you a little bit of background. So we looked at our applicant pools, and this is just the general number of applicants we got from years 2010 to 2015 calendar year. At that time, we had 2,800 plus applicants for firefighter and firefighter paramedic. In the 5 calendar year period from 2015 to 2020, that number went down to 718. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one is there's been a general boom of jobs in the fire service industry with the baby boomer retirements. We've certainly seen that with Santa Rosa, but across the fire service, there's a lot more jobs than there used to be. And also there seems to be a sharp decline in interest in jobs in public safety. So the recruitment numbers are down throughout the fire service in general. The numbers of those enrolling in public service programs at colleges and junior colleges is down as well. So in 2014, as just a point of reference, we transitioned to a firefighter paramedic rank only. So since 2014, we've required the medical certification of paramedic. So that is a little bit more difficult to obtain. It's not terribly difficult, and it's all available locally here, but it certainly could be translated. That could be one of the gaps that we have. Unfortunately, it ties directly into our service level. The service level we provide is an advanced life support organization. So that's a tough nut to crack. And also I want to reference that in 2017, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, we transitioned to using a statewide standardized written test. We no longer purchase tests to hold written tests here within Santa Rosa. That was done as a cost savings and as a practice of best practices throughout the fire service. So the general best practice steps that we take in our recruitment process, and this again is for firefighter, paramedic, is you submit an application into human resources. It goes through a minimum qualifications review. You'll have a written examination. Like I talked about, we used to hold our own tests here, which we purchased from a national company that had standardized tests. And we've since transitioned to using the Firefighter Candidate Testing Center written test. And then there's a physical ability test. Now we may use the possession of a CPAT card, which is a statewide physical agility test that you pass and you get a card, and essentially that's all we're looking for. There's a series of oral interviews with Santa Rosa Fire Department and Santa Rosa City of Santa Rosa Human Resources staff. And there's fire chiefs oral interviews where, for instance, Chief Gosner and I just interviewed 15 entry-level employees earlier this week and sort of get to know them a little bit better and see what their fit is in the organization. And then we use third-party background checks with a polygraph, physical, and psychiatric exam. So that's what we do, and it's very much a best practice throughout the fire service and public safety industries. Next slide, please. So to expand a little bit on our current implementation of best practices, we currently advertise when we have positions open and we're going to go through recruitment. We advertise with roughly 30 different platforms. This is all through our human resources department. They're referenced in the plan. I'm not going to read them all to you, but it's a very broad and wide aspect of who we advertise with. We do use standardized written tests. I touched on that quite a bit earlier. Standardized physical ability test. And then our oral interviews, again, it's 2 rounds. One's going to be with members of the fire department and human resources, and then each score fills out a rubric, so it's very objective. And then the chief's interview with the fire chief and deputy fire chief, which is a little bit more subjective to get to know the people in general. Our application window time is very standard. We've actually expanded that quite a bit to make sure that that everybody has an opportunity to apply. And recently we reinstituted open lateral recruitments, much like the police department does. We currently have a lateral recruit class in doing their tower time right now. They started on Monday, so they just completed their first week. So we have 5 laterals coming in from other organizations. They go through a much briefer academy, and they're put on the line a lot quicker. So again, these are best practices throughout the industry and just things that we've implemented recently, or not recently, but have always had to try to attract a wide, diverse talent pool. Next slide, please. So this page looks at the demographics of the Santa Rosa Fire Department as we sit right now. And again, this is for firefighter and firefighter paramedic. This doesn't get into our prevention bureau or our administrative bureau. And so the column on the left is the Santa Rosa demographics based off of the last census. The middle column is Santa Rosa Fire Department. Generally, as it sits right now, we've actually, since this was built, we've had some retirements and we've hired some more people. So the numbers are close. They may be skewed just a little bit, and they actually may be better than they were when this was done. And then the right column shows the U.S. Fire Department's average. And so what I take away from this is not a Santa Rosa centric problem. The diversity within the fire service is not a Santa Rosa centric problem. It's an industry-wide problem. So really what our hope is that this plan is a jumping off point, and it sets the bar and sets the trend for other fire departments throughout the region, state, and county. Next slide, please. So again, we're looking at 2 demographic looks here. So these are the applicants that we've had in the last 5 years last 5 calendar years. On the left, you'll see by gender, and you can see that essentially we've had almost 94% male applicants and 2.5% female applicants, with 4.2 that are unknown or declined to answer. So throughout our statistics, there's a 3 to 5% variability in the statistics based on whether or not the applicant chose to actually answer the question. And the graphic on the right depicts the applicants we've had for firefighter paramedic by race or ethnicity. And you can see that, again, it's largely white males applying to be firefighters. And so my takeaway from this, and this is really what is driving this entire plan, is we always have used the standard term of, well, the candidate pool is just not very diverse. Well, in my opinion, we need to change the pool water, and make that candidate pool more diverse by investing in the community and bringing in local talent to increase both the diversity and the numbers that we're getting in the fire department. Next slide, please. So the analytical conclusions in looking at our numbers is there's a sharp decrease in interested and qualified candidates in both public safety programs, and there's also a surplus of positions in public safety. Small to mid-sized organizations are a bit of a disadvantage in recruiting. So, for instance, with Santa Rosa, we're pretty mid-sized. We're pretty busy. We get a lot of good fires, and you guys have seen what we do. But if you compare that to, you take a 20, 25-year-old kid, and they're applying for Santa Rosa, San Francisco, and Oakland, well, they're going to go where the action's at. So those bigger departments tend to attract more people. They have much bigger academies. They hire a lot more all at once. We all have the same general minimum qualifications and testing processes, but they're going to tend to go where the action is. So, and then, like I talked about, there's a lack of diversity in the candidate pool in general. And so our response is we need to enhance recruiting strategies to attract a diverse talent pool of qualified candidates. We need to enhance recruiting strategies to align with current and predicted cultural and generational norms. And really the heart of this is we need to deploy a grassroots recruitment campaign to attract and develop local and diverse talent into the organization and profession. Next slide, please. So our strategies that we have outlined, there's 5, and these are very broad and very general. Keep in mind that these are strategies. There may be some examples in there. But what I've told our workforce, what I've told our labor management team, discussed with human resources and community engagement and our command staff, is that there's nothing off the table at this point. These are strategies, and in fire service terms, and we get into the tactics and tasks of things. So these are broad, and this is a living document. So this is not something where this is set in stone. We put this together and this is the way it's going to be. This is going to be a living document. So we're going to have to adjust and adapt to what we see or what we predict are the trends coming out of the current generational and demographical norms. Next slide, please. So the first strategy we're looking at is communications. And so essentially right now we do an okay job, in my opinion, of using social media and media-based platforms to advertise, recruit, and retain employees, but we can do much better. So we need to really focus our recruiting on technology, app-based systems. Everybody has that device in their hand at all times. I have 2 teenagers, well, I have 3 teenagers at home now, and that thing's in their hand 24/7, 365. So that's where we need to put our information. So we need to use real-time prevalent information that's going to be, that's really going to grab their attention and draw them into public safety or into the fire service. We need to utilize more social media, in my opinion. I don't, quite frankly, know anything about it, so I'm not very good with it. So we need to rely on the people in our organization who are very good at that. So our community outreach specialist, Daisy Vargas, she's very good at that. So we've already started strategizing how we're going to advance and use social media better. And I basically told her, they don't want to hear from me. My kids make fun of me for trying to act cool. And so I need somebody who understands cool right now, and cool is probably not even the right word, to reach out and make sure that we're attracting our local talent. And we really need to do a lot of work on our website and make sure that we have, most importantly, and this is one of the biggest things, is how-to guides. So somebody can simply go to our website and click on a how-to guide on how to apply to be a firefighter, what schooling you have to do to be a firefighter, what the job really entails, so they can go and look at that stuff and understand what it looks like. You know, it needs to be flashy and prevalent. And so this is something we can do very easily. We've already started to actually strategize this to make sure that everybody has those tools in their hand to basically attack it and go after these jobs. Next slide, please. So the recruitment programs are really the heart of the plan. And I'll probably spend my most of the time that I have here talking about this. And so in order to shift the paradigm and solve these medium to long-term recruitment strategy challenges, we need to make a long-term investment in the community. So strategy 2.1 looks at community engagement and education. And this is essentially where we need to go out, and we do this to a degree. We really just need to enhance and bolster this, tenfold plus, is go out into the community and be engaged at local schools. So for instance, right now we're only involved at the CT program at LCL, and we need to be involved at the CT programs at all schools. We need to be involved younger, so middle school programs. We're going to focus on civic organizations that are focused on civic and business interests, women's groups, veterans groups, nonprofits, and community groups for the LGBTQI communities. We're going to have to use the talent and the diversity of our current workforce to really go out and make these connections. And we're going to do that with the mindset of aiming upstream to engage our local youth at an early age, demonstrate and educate them about the opportunities that are afforded by a career in public safety, and partner with community groups to provide the youth with guidance, resources, mentorship, and to ensure their readiness to become qualified applicants in the fire service within a few years of graduating from high school. So this is really what I'm most excited about, is getting out in the community, engaging with these groups, and the crux of it is we need to educate them on what the job really entails, because people see TV, they see the Tubbs fire, they see the Kincaid fire, and they think that's the day-to-day. And that goes for the parents as well. There's a lot of parents that I've talked to, like, hey, I don't want my kid in the fire service. And it's like, well, let me tell you what the job really entails, what it really is. And then there's other people like, well, I really can't go through all that schooling. Well, guess what? All that schooling is afforded at the junior college in Santa Rosa. It's in Windsor. It's JC college rates. And it's only 2 to 3 years of school, and you're minimally qualified to apply for a job in the city of Santa Rosa. So a lot of it's just educating people on exactly what the job entails and exactly what it takes to get there, and realize, quite frankly, it isn't that hard. Strategy 2.2 is a Youth Explorer program. This is something that other departments have that we don't. It essentially affords an opportunity for youth that are 14 to 20 years old to come into the fire department. They're not put into a safety position. They're not put into harm's way or into a dangerous atmosphere, but essentially gives them exposure to what the career looks like. It gives them exposure to the firehouse, exposure to the work. It gives them some training and some certifications. And it's, I was contacted by one of our firefighters after I sent this plan out, who came up through an Explorer program in San Jose. And he was very excited about actually building this, because this is where he was exposed to the fire service and where he gained his interest in the fire service. Strategy 2.3 is a mentorship program. So essentially, this is a comprehensive mentorship program to guide local youth or anybody within the community into a career in the fire service. And one of the big issues that we see is the inability to successfully get through a background. And so a lot of this is having somebody who will guide you through keeping your nose clean, keeping a clean background, getting the education that you need. Those that don't have social or family ties to the fire service, help them understand what the impact of their life would be. And so I've already had some interest expressed in this as well from our organization. So people are excited about this plan. They're really excited about being engaged with the community. And I think the mentorship program is going to be one of the cornerstones of our plan. Strategy 2.4 is partnership with the Santa Rosa Junior College. We actually have one of the best recruiting tools for the fire service in our backyard with the Santa Rosa Junior College. So somebody can go to the Windsor campus of the SRJC and get everything that they need to have minimum qualifications to work anywhere in the fire service at this point. You're paying JC rates, you can live at home. And so it really is important. We have a very close bond with the JC. They used to run their fire academy at our training facility. They've since built their own. But we've always had a very close tie with them. A lot of our applicants, even now, come out of the junior college. They provide ongoing education in the fire service and paramedic programs. And actually, one of our retired battalion chiefs just took over as the director of the fire service program up there. So our bond's even closer. So it's continuing to partner with the junior college and do things like holding positions just for Santa Rosa side, so we can get people that are coming out of the mentorship program or out of the Explorer program directly into the program, so they don't have to go into the lottery or anything like that. And then also one of the things we've talked about is partnering with nonprofits or NGOs to provide scholarship programs as well to the junior college. And then strategy 2.5, I hold this one near and dear to my heart. It's Women in the Fire Service Day. My 15-year-old daughter is expressing interest in joining the fire service. And so we talk a lot about that on a pseudo-daily basis, but it's essentially partnering with the JC and other local fire departments to have a one-day annual or biannual event to honor women in the fire service and community members who bring them in so they can hear from women in the fire service about being a woman in the fire service, what it takes, what the true culture is, what the true team and family aspect of it is, and hopefully draw more women into the fire service. As you can see, our numbers throughout the fire service are poor. So this is sort of the meat and potatoes of the entire plan is these programs. And like I said, I sent this out to our organization on Wednesday, the entire plan. And I've already had a lot of interest from those in the LGBTQ community, Asian community, women's groups already reach out and really want to get engaged with this. So when I get to the end and I show you our timeline, I think our timeline may be advanced based off the interest that I'm already getting out of our organization and through other city departments. Next slide, please. So strategy 3 is our selection process, and we've already made a lot of strides in this. We were working on it when this plan was prepared, and we're pretty much checking these already off of the list. So we just want to make sure that we're being fair and equitable in all of our selection processes. So strategy 3.1 is instituting implicit bias and cultural competency training for those. Initially, it's going to be for those who want to be involved in any of our interview panels across the board. And so we're working with the Inclusion Council to remain up to date on current protocols and training, but we're going to bring that training in our training and safety divisions, working on bringing that training in. So anybody who's on an interview panel for the City of Santa Rosa Fire Department will have gone through this training until it is rolled out to the entire city. And then use of community members in oral interviews. Typically, this is something that we reserve for higher levels of promotions, whether it's to fire captain or battalion chief, but we are instituting having community members on our oral boards, even at the entry-level positions. So our training and safety division, which really does a lot of the human resources side of the work, is already working on developing a list with community engagement, human resources, a list of community members that we can use for any phase of our oral interview process. Next slide, please. And then data, can you go back one, please? Strategy 4 is data analysis. And so essentially we need to continually look at both our general recruitment numbers and the diversity of those recruitment numbers and adjust our plan accordingly. So these strategies essentially look at tracking engagement, tracking the effectiveness of our communications, and tracking the effectiveness of our recruitment programs. Again, these are both short, medium, and long-term plans, so we're going to continually be looking and evolving and adjusting our plans as necessary. Next slide, please. So when we get into staffing, this is a little difficult, especially understanding the position the city's in financially, but we don't have any personnel currently assigned to recruitment or diversity. I know obviously the city is working on the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer position, which would be a great help. So when we look at this, if we had the platinum plan and an open checkbook, we would look to assign a full-time captain as a recruitment program manager and a SAA to a recruitment program coordinator position. And essentially that would be their full-time job is recruitment and diversity within the fire department. Somebody to run these programs full time. In the meantime, and knowing that that's unlikely, is we're going to continue to run this with the staff that we have. It just may, quite frankly, extend the timelines on which we can get things done. And the plan is really dependent on its breadth and depth, and how inclusive and how involved we can be is based off of resources that we can apply to this. Strategy 5.2 is development of a recruitment cadre. So this is taking 6 of our current members, 1 out of each rank, that represent the diversity in community, and put them out into running these recruitment strategies and objectives. So it's making sure that those that are out there in the community that are from a diverse background, that they're seeing that the fire department is diverse, we can be better, and making sure that they have like-minded individuals talking to them to make sure that we're hitting cultural norms. And then 5.3 is development of a recruitment strategy oversight committee. So this is basically the oversight committee that would be monitoring all of these strategies, and it would be comprised of our own command staff, Santa Rosa Firefighters Local 1401, human resources, community engagement, and a commensurate number of community members to represent the diversity of the city. So we want to make sure that the community is really involved with this, and that it's not just us sitting back and throwing darts at a dartboard, but we actually have the community engaged in this program that's an investment in the community. Next slide, please. So this is our general timeline, and obviously, like I said, this is really dependent on the resources that either we as a fire department or as a city can throw at it. We're proud to say that we've already made strides in some of our strategies. Like I mentioned, we're already working on the social media and the website updates. We're working on the community panelists and the implicit bias and cultural competency training. As I said, in just rolling this out to the department 2 or 3 days ago, I've already had interest in running mentorship programs, running Women in the Fire Service Day, and running the Explorer program. So we may be able to expedite some of these, but it's just going to be, it's dependent on the cost and how we can move things around within our own budget to make sure that we're hitting this. But we really like to be off and running within the next year. And that's why we're moving ahead of things as fast as we can, being judicious and careful about what we do. But we're really trying to get ahead of the curve and make an impact in the community early on. And because, like I said, this is long term, we may not even see some of the results of this in my career here. But I think it's the right thing to do, and we really want to start working on it now, because we're probably behind the curve a little bit already. Lastly, I'd like to thank City of Santa Rosa's Human Resources Department for helping guide this plan through, and then particularly Director Tejas at Community Engagement. We've spent a lot of time on Zoom talking to each other about this plan, with Magali's experience with Sonoma State University and La Cienega. She's had a great insight into this, and really appreciate her time and efforts in making this plan right. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll turn it over to the subcommittee for any questions.
Thank you, Chief, for that report. Very thorough and timely. I really appreciate the effort. Let's just go. Victoria, any questions?
I do have a question. First of all, thank you for such a great report, and I find it fairly comprehensive in nature. One of the things that I was wondering is how the culture within the fire department itself, the day-to-day experience for people will be adapted to address the needs of specifically women in the service, people who might be giving birth, nursing, and that type of thing. And if that's being included in the plan, I know those are expensive accommodations and there's workplace exemptions, but that seems to me to be one of the challenges. And I'm wondering if there are plans to, and funding requests associated to address those accommodations for all of us who make all of you.
Yes, absolutely. And quite frankly, the culture in the fire service is interesting, and this is hard for me to explain in a way that everybody completely believes it. But sort of the beauty of the fire service, in my opinion, is that it doesn't matter what gender you are, what race you are, what your beliefs are. all that we really care about is that the person next to us can do the job and that we can depend on them. You could have a third eye, whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. And we don't really use pronouns in the sense that we use ranks. So it's firefighter Smith, it's Chief Westrope, it's whatever. So we don't use those pronouns. So it's very inclusive. If you can do the job, that's all that really matters to anybody across the board. So that's sort of the beauty of the fire service. Specifically to your question, a lot of those provisions have already been made. So we have a breastfeeding policy, we have a privacy policy. We're using COVID to change some of the issues that we had regarding privacy in our fire stations. So for instance, Station 1 that used to have a big dorm is now broken up into smaller rooms. So there is more privacy within that. And then as far as your question regarding females who are pregnant or breastfeeding, we have breastfeeding policy and privacy policies regarding that. And then with pregnancy, we've had female firefighters be pregnant and give birth while on duty, and we accommodate that, and we can bring them in if they want to continue to work but not be in a safety position. We'll bring them into the office and assign them light duty. And so they're still making full pay, still contributing to the organization, protecting the community, just in a way that protects them and protects the child. So a lot of those are already there, so I don't see any additional resource needs towards that. Can it be better? Absolutely. And that's where we're going to work with our community partners, the elected officials, those of us that are already in the fire service who understand that and can really wrap their heads around it. And so we will continue to work on making that better. So I think we're in an okay spot, but it definitely can be better, and we're going to continue to work on that.
Well, I certainly encourage you to continue to ask for the resources you need so that we can, I don't know if there are any remaining, I guess that's the question, are there any remaining workplace exemptions?
Can you explain that a little bit better?
Workplace exemption would be wherein, you know, it's and perhaps you can help explain the legal definition of a workplace exemption. But a workplace exemption is where you get exempted from otherwise accommodation for people with alternative needs. I mean, we're not really people with alternative needs. We're more than half the population, but you know, you know, usually it's in a disability situation. Although, you know, being pregnant or having a child isn't exactly a disability. Maybe Sue, you can jump in here. I'm having a hard time explaining it, but I'm aware that the fire service has in the past avoided making accommodations for women based on using the legal avenue of workplace exemptions because of the cost of instituting these changes. And I'm wondering if those exist at this point in the fire service.
Not to my knowledge. We essentially take everybody as they are, and we will make whatever accommodations we need to make sure that they're comfortable and that their needs are being met. So I don't know of any legal ramifications that would preclude us from doing that. And it's certainly not anything that we're proactively looking at.
Okay. And then the last question I had was around the actually, maybe I'll save it for after we hear from public comment. So thank you very much for this excellent presentation and for answering my questions.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. John, do you have some questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me turn my volume up a little bit. It was nice to hear that the use of pronouns, which can be challenging at times. It's kind of a for many a new concept, and for those that are dealing with the restrictions on their pronouns, probably a beacon of light. I appreciate strategy 2.5, Women in Fire Service Day. What I'm curious about is, my notes are a little bit scratchy here, but can those that are identifying as male find a satisfactory occupation within our fire department?
Yes, they can. In fact, I'll tell you a story, and it's a little it's a little emotional for us. We've actually had 2 employees transition in the workplace, and one just recently retired. And so transitioning from male to female was a very brave thing to do, particularly in this industry. But what ended up happening was the level of support and the unchanging way in which this employee was treated was so endearing that actually the fire station and being at work was the safe place for this employee. She said as she went out in the community and she would get looks and people would say things and terribly mean things would happen to her, that never happened at the fire department. She came here, she was happy, everybody treated her just like she was treated, you know, any other time in her 35-year career. And so the fire department was her happy place. So I think that really speaks to the level of inclusion that we have in the fire department. And it really, it broke my heart on one hand, but it made me very, you know, swollen with pride on the other hand, that this employee could come back to work and be treated exactly as they were at any other time, and to be accepted right back into the fire service without question. So I hope that example answers your question, council member. I'm not sure if I hit it right on the mark, but yeah. So I'll turn it back over to you if you need to clarify something.
I appreciate that, and I think you hit it right on the mark. And another question I have is, are there opportunities for those that are that stereotypically cops and firefighters were men, and nurses were women, and if you were a female and weighed 130 or 40 pounds, dragging out a 200-pound individual from a fire may or may not be a challenge. Do we have opportunities for those that are unable or unwilling to satisfy the physical demands, have an availability to become a part of our department other than firefighting?
Absolutely. And so that was sort of my disclaimer in the beginning. I looked at the firefighter and paramedic rank just as really a matter of brevity. I didn't want this, if I looked at, you know, every job class that we had, it was going to become a very long and laborious report. So what I've told our department and sort of what I prefaced our conversation with today was that this is easily translated into other areas within the fire service and our department. So the example would be, to your point, is there's somebody who, hey, I'm really interested in serving the community. I really want to give back, but either I don't want to, or whatever the case may be, I don't want to be on a fire engine. I don't want to go into a fire. What else can I do? Okay, we have opportunities in fire prevention. Do you want to be a fire inspector and arson investigator? Those who are really sharp at math and stuff that I can't do, do you want to be a plans examiner? You know, there's other opportunities there within the fire department, or, you know, quite frankly, our administrative staff. They do a lot of work and they keep the business side of this thing running. There's opportunities there as well. So while this report speaks to firefighter and safety positions, ultimately, I think it translates very well across the board into the fire service and our fire department, more specifically into any entry-level job class where we need people that do other things other than be firefighters. So I agree with that. And I've told that to everybody here, particularly our fire marshal and our ASO, that while this report speaks to firefighters, this translates to our entire organization.
Thank you for that. And my personal belief is that getting the word out, and it has been a challenge for decades to let everyone know that there potentially is a place to work in our fire department. And I think that there is there is probably a concern of our current firefighters, especially those that are of a large stature, that the person that there may be a need for them to be dragged out of a fire, one of our own firefighters, and can that person that sees a need fulfill it? And I think that part of our challenge is to let them know that yes, they can, or they can communicate with someone that can help. Not everyone can do everything. So I really do I appreciate that. I also appreciate the oversight committee. That's a 5 stars for me in helping with community members develop strategies to try to get the word out. It is a chronic challenge to get those of all areas of our community to understand that if they want to be involved in our fire department, whether it be a firefighter or some other piece of that organization, that yes, please do come and apply and talk to our recruiters and find a place for them in our organization.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, John?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I just had a couple here, Scott. Can you talk a little bit more about the physical agility? It's kind of what Councilmember Sawyer was talking about, the CPAC card. And I don't necessarily need to know the details, but I know in the police service, it used to be, some of the physical testing was push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and a run, right? Which were not very job specific. So it evolved into now the testing is representative of the actual actions that are needed to complete the tasks from the job requirements. So can you talk a little bit more about the CPAT and has it passed the legal muster?
Yeah, absolutely. So the CPAT is part of the Firefighter Candidate Testing Center process, which is a California Professional Firefighters run organization. So it's essentially the California Firefighters Union that runs it. And there's testing centers all over the state, so you can go anywhere and get your CPAT card. And it is very job specific. So it's using a sledgehammer to drive a ram. It's getting through a window. It's dragging something. So it has passed legal muster. It's pretty much used throughout the entire state. It is a CPAT card. I don't know of any organization that's using their own physical agility test anymore. So it is job specific. But the beauty of it is that the candidates can go and they can practice this test, and they have people that are on staff that specifically will train them and help them get through the process. And even more importantly is they actually have a female firefighter candidate only part where, because body mechanics are different, obviously, for males and females. So they teach them different techniques based off their body composition to be successful in the test. So it's actually way better than anything we've had in the past, because they have that ability to go and practice. They have the ability to know what's on the test and to have personal trainers there that are actually helping them based off their body composition to get through the test successfully.
Great, thanks. That's very encouraging. So I'm very impressed with the comprehensive nature of the plan. So how or when will the City Council and community members be apprised of the progress and success of this plan?
So that was sort of one of my questions that I had was, I wasn't sure where you or City Manager McGlynn wanted to go with the plan next, if it needed to be reported to the entire council, if it was something you were going to take back. It's ready for print, essentially, just leaving it as it's a living document, so it could change, but essentially the strategies are good to go as is. So I really, as of today, I consider it public facing. So that was sort of one of my questions for the group was, where do you want to go with this next? I'm happy to present it to the full council in an open council meeting. Obviously, we'll post it on our website and share it with the community. But I just wasn't sure where the city wanted to go with it next, and realized that was a gap in my planning, was making sure we knew what the next steps were.
Okay. And what I'd suggest at the end of this item, we'll give you that feedback as to what the three of us are thinking those next steps would be. So, and then kind of tied into this on that strategy 5.3, develop the oversight committee. I would just suggest maybe entertaining having a representative of City Council on there, because that's kind of that bridge between the City Council and those of us on council have a different platform to talk about this, to assist this plan and to keep the community apprised of it. So I would just offer that for the consideration for
absolutely. I actually realized that as I was reading it, I thought the same thing.
Good answer. Okay.
It's the truth.
Any additional questions from Victoria or John? All righty, then let's see. We're now taking public comment on item 5.1, Santa Rosa Fire Department Recruitment and Diversity Strategic Plan. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes. Madam Host, could you facilitate public comment on item 5.1, please?
You bet. As you can see, a timer is before you for the convenience of the speaker and the viewers. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you are asked to do so. Your microphone will be muted at the end of the countdown and at the conclusion of your comment. If you are participating in the meeting from the Spanish channel in Zoom, we have an interpreter on standby on the English channel to assist your public comment. If you wish to make a public comment, please be sure to pause your comment to allow for interpretation. Those using the interpreter support will be afforded additional time for your public comment as required by the Brown Act. For Spanish speakers, at the time you hear your name called, turn off your Spanish channel to make sure your public comment is heard on the main channel. In that case, when you're participating from the Spanish channel, the icon may look like a circle with an ES in the middle and the word Spanish underneath it. The first public comment will be from Roman. Roman, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
I can see it. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please identify yourself for public record and your time begins now.
Hi, my name is Roman. Thank you, Scott, for the presentation, and thank you to all of our firefighters. I wanted to bring up the recent bill that was passed around formerly incarcerated individuals who help fight fires in California. It makes up a large
Roman, are you there? Roman, I can still see you participating in the meeting.
I'm sorry?
Oh, there you go. It looks like you had cut out there for a moment. Please continue.
Oh, shoot. I think my internet's going out. But yeah, outreach to DACA recipients, especially through the JC or even our undocumented workers, provided we can offer them some sort of protections. I don't know what that looks like, but you know, our entire county functions off of their labor as a primarily wine tourism hotspot, and I'm sure our fire department could provide better working conditions by a mile. So maybe if that could be considered in the future, what challenges there might be around that could be discussed. Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, and everybody. I yield my time.
Thank you, Roman. The next public comment will be from Carla. Carla, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Thank you.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for public record and your time begins now.
Sure. My name is Carla Viking and I'm a Santa Rosa resident. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for putting a concerted effort into improving recruitment. I think it's really nice to see, and I appreciate our firefighters so much. Ramon cut out a little bit, but I do love the idea of maybe having some flexibility when it comes to people who have a very minor record, like, you know, non-violent crimes, that maybe we could loosen those rules to get more people, just a suggestion. And I realize that you guys are in like a tough spot, but I hope you find more people and I appreciate you trying. Thanks.
Thank you, Carla. The next public comment will be from Shirley and Bob. Shirley and Bob, I've unmuted your microphone. Can you please confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
Yes, yeah, there's this timer.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for public record if you so choose, and your time begins now.
This is Shirley Cheel, resident of Santa Rosa. First, I want to say thank you for the presentation, but particularly for all your work within the fire. We lost our house, but now we're back. So I just want to say thank you. But I'm wondering if there's any possibility of outreach to, through possibly the foster care system for the youth, and maybe through social advocates for youth, or possibly even homeless youth, to reach out to them as possibly, possibilities of getting a better job. That's it. Thank you.
Colin, the next public comment will be from Colin. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please identify yourself for public record, and your time begins now.
My name is Colin Metcalf. I'm a lifetime resident of Santa Rosa in Sonoma County. I grew up in the Coffee Park neighborhood. I want to start by saying thank you for all of the work that our firefighters put in. You're the community's real heroes, and we all appreciate you. We see you going out there every day, and I'm always going to be supportive. Y'all do great work. I want to echo a similar sentiment to what Ramon said earlier. I would definitely like to see, I don't know how much Santa Rosa Fire Department works with incarcerated crews. It's my understanding that that is primarily CAL FIRE, if I understand correctly, but I would like to see, in terms of increasing recruitment from affected, marginalized groups, it would be great if CAL FIRE incarcerated crews who work in the area, maybe Santa Rosa Fire Department could get in contact with them if there are people who live close by. There are people who are going to be coming back here after their stints in incarceration in prisons and jails, and we could contact them, because our incarcerated crews are some of the folks who work the hardest, and they go into the most dangerous spots. And I think those would be invaluable members of the firefighting team to bring onto our own force and talk to them and say, you've had all of these experiences doing these like hotshot type operations and working in these really dangerous conditions all over the state. And would you be willing to bring the expertise that you got from being in an incarcerated crew to Sonoma County? I think it would be great. Get people jobs, get people back into the community, get people worked back in so that they can contribute and do work that they're incredibly proud of. And thanks for the rest of the work that you're doing. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Colin. Mayor, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised. So I'm going to move along to voice message public comments, which we did not receive any, nor did we receive any email public comments on this item. And that concludes public comment.
Great, thank you for that. So Chief Restrup, if you could just confirm, is there any other feedback you'd like from the subcommittee other than next steps?
At this time, no, that's all I would really be looking for.
Okay, Mr. Sawyer, I see you have your hand raised. Why don't you go first with any questions and or comments about next steps?
Thank you, Mayor. A comment about the public comment. This is a perfect example of where we learn of some opportunities that perhaps we may or may not have thought of before. I think that the looking into the formerly incarcerated men and women in our community and social advocates for youth. I mean, here are individuals who have potentially thought about, what the heck am I going to do with the rest of my life? And there could be some real opportunities there, depending on whatever legal restrictions we fall under. I'm not saying that there are any, but I really like the idea of finding a program to say, look, we have an opportunity for you, and being able to move forward with that. And I hadn't thought about that those particular groups, but I would think that there would be a great deal of value in some research into looking at them as potential employees of the city of Santa Rosa. Some are either incarcerated or find themselves in difficult situations, not necessarily because of actions that they have done, but also that's also a potential. But I just see this as an opportunity that I have never thought about as far as a target. And I think it would be well worth the research to look into those groups for potential employees.
Sorry, do you have any comments about next steps?
Next steps, well, I think that we are probably receiving from the community and myself some things to look into, other than the things that I have also already raised. I'm not looking for next steps.
Okay. Would you like this to go before the full council?
I would once we have some solid recommendations or some solid potential areas to move into for discussion by the council. I think there's probably we have identified enough as opportunities for the council to discuss. And as far as the timing, I think the timing would be based on getting clear recommendations to the council so that they don't need to analyze what it is we're looking for. So I think clarity and some nice firm recommendations to the council would be really important. And as long as it takes to do that, is what I think how we should move forward.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Fleming.
Great, thank you very much. I want to thank the public for your input and for making the time during the work week to join the call. I really like, in addition to foster youth and previous and incarcerated folks, the idea of targeting DACA recipients as potential fire service members. And then one of the questions I had, and it was what I was thinking about earlier, but I was curious to know how we might be able to adjust our firefighter pinning ceremonies to be more public facing and more inclusive. And if that has been something that we've looked at, because as you mentioned before, you don't use gender pronouns, but the last time I had an opportunity to attend a pinning ceremony, it was an incredibly gendered event where partners were referred to as wives and firefighters were referred to as he and him. And so I'm curious to know how we can, move forward so that your vision, and I believe the desires of our current firefighters can be realized from the beginning, whether that could be a barbecue at a Howarth Park or some other public venue, or some way that we can from the beginning not sort of start out with this thing where we have a bunch of guys up front and a bunch of women and children in the audience.
So to your first point, that issue has been resolved. And so we've made some adjustments. We haven't had a badge pinning, obviously, in 6+ months. So we're gonna have a big one here eventually whenever COVID lifts. But those adjustments have been made. We've discussed it at length at our command staff level and with the union on how we need to adjust that. And I agree. I think it's a great idea and a great opportunity to present to the public, exactly what the job entails and to make it more of a community event. Really, my vision is to make us more of a community first, community facing organization. We're not just a bunch of, people driving around in a big red fire engine. It's their organization, it's their fire engine, it's their fire truck, whatever the case may be. So making it more public facing, making it more of a public recognized event is a great idea, and I'll offer that.
Okay. Great, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. And as far as next steps go, I would like to see this. This is one of those where, you know, the more input we get, the better I believe it is. And so when you're ready to bring it to the council, I would love to hear my colleagues and the, you know, broader community, people who might not be able to jump on a call during a workday, have some input, or at the very least a study session, which is typically during the workday, but at least it would draw some more input. I know it's more work for you guys, but I definitely think that we, in this short time that we've had with it today, can see how these things evolve when it has more, it's one of those more cooks in the kitchen is better. So I look forward to seeing it come to the full council if that's something that my colleagues concur with.
Great. Thank you for those comments. And so, Michael, again, I'm really impressed. I appreciate both the chiefs here and all the work that went on here, because I know this doesn't happen by magic. But I think this is an area that's very appropriate for the fire department and our entire city organization to be focusing on. I'm a big believer the recruitment and retention of employees is not just the two of yours responsibilities as the head of the organization, but it's all of ours. It's a shared responsibility. So because of that, I really would like to see this come to the full council, because on, you know, your second to last slide, you had some dollar figures there. I really think, you know, that whole idea of shared responsibility, council's got a responsibility to fund it to the level of what we, you know, that end product that we want to see. And if that means, you know, reallocating dollars, I think that at least that option should at least be presented to the entire council. But again, having it at another public meeting, at a city council meeting, I really want the community to know, if you're just sitting around waiting for, you know, the fire department to recruit this diverse organization, not going to happen. Everyone needs to be engaged in this. And so let's all take our different role with that. And because of that, you know, I think it would be a good idea to get it to council whenever your time and energy is available to do it. Probably, we're probably talking 2021 realistically, but I'll let you guys make that decision with the city manager. Any final comments from either of the chiefs here?
Nothing for me. Just thank you for your time and appreciate your partnership on this.
Great. Excellent presentation. Okay, because we're having some translation services, we're going to have to take more frequent breaks. So we'll take our first break. We'll reconvene at 10:30. Reconvene at 10:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I put up the intermission slide, I am going to take this opportunity to transition the interpreters into the different roles.
All right, Liz, are you ready to go? Or Dina?
Hi, Mayor. I am here. Liz should be on the line and available to take a roll call.
Yes. Are we ready?
Okay, that's where I was going. Okay, Mr. Sawyer is joining us. There we go. Okay, we'll reconvene. Can we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Sawyer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fleming.
Hola.
Mayor Schwedhelm.
Here.
Thank you. All members are present, Mayor.
Thank you so much. All right, item 5.2. Fire Marshal Scott Moon, I believe you're introducing this, or Chief Gosner, are you?
Yeah, I can introduce it, but Scott Moon, and so I believe Scott Moon has been promoted. Yep, I see him, and we also need Assistant Fire Marshal Paul Lowenthal, if we can do that as well. But this is, thank you. This is regarding the vegetation management plan. Much like the last plan we saw, this is something that the city manager wanted this group to see before it went to full council. So this is, we're here to present this plan, and we'll let Scott Moon take it over from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Good morning, Mayor Schwedhelm, Vice Mayor Fleming, and Councilmember Sawyer. I know we have come before you numerous times since the Tubbs fire to share with you regulations, recommendations, and the most recent presentation by Assistant Fire Marshal Lowenthal was to provide you with the finished document related to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And after that presentation, we felt that this was the appropriate time to bring forward a formal vegetation management program that would focus on a vision and then conclude with a proposal. So a lot of the material we know we have shared with you. We wanted to just initiate kind of a history really quickly, more for the public, for their interest and education, and then lead into some of the actionable type items, and then conclude with what that vision and the final proposal would be. So if we could move to the next slide, please. With the history, as I mentioned, we have come before you to share the boundaries of what is our existing wildland urban interface area. Initially, this area was developed after the 1991 Oakland Hills fire, and it was developed in the context of the Bates Bill. So that was the requirement for the director of CAL FIRE to designate areas within counties throughout the entire state of California to identify those areas with specific either topographical, fuel-related items, a history of fire threats, and boundary those areas and designate them as very high fire hazard severity zones. So for us, the city of Santa Rosa, we're located in what's referenced as a local responsibility area, and the pink shaded locations are what was provided to us at the director's level from CAL FIRE to identify our areas of recognized threat within the community. Next slide, please. In the early 1990s, we had plans in place with staffing at the time to enact the steps that were called for through the Bates Bill. And as you can see, there were 4 levels of concentration, and locally we added a 5th that called out for addressing. But the basic requirements focused on clearing vegetation in what's referenced most times as a defensible space boundary, but that 30 to 100 foot pathway or perimeter from your structure out from your home. Removing tree branches within 10 feet of your chimneys. Within those areas, you're also going to focus on mesh screening for spark arresters that may be in play. And then the obvious cleaning gutters and roofs of any debris that may be in place. So in the mid to late 1990s, we did have staffing and we had the ability to get out into these areas. But what we experienced was a large amount of growth within the community. And we also noticed that we had multiple mandates from state and federal on the fire crews that were performing these inspections at the time. And we realized that the program needed to be paused at that time. So what we resulted to was notification to the homeowners, which is a requirement of the Bates bill, to advise them of their residence within one of these designated areas. However, we, as I mentioned, paused the inspection portion of that program. So it would unfortunately allow that to basically sit idle. Next slide, please. And in 2007, you may recall, we did have the opportunity when the director of CAL FIRE remapped the entire state. So every county was revisited and boundaries were redrawn, again, based on that same priority system of the types of fuel, the development, the topography, and also the fire history within these areas. And in 2007, the areas of our community were greatly reduced. And as you can see from the map that's before you, the more reddish area became the focal area within the local responsibility area, where requirements moving forward would be focused. And we realized at the local level, we still felt the boundaries that were initially established for us in the early 90s were of concern. So we had the opportunity at that point in time to re-identify those areas as wildland urban interface areas, or the WUI. And you've heard us reference that numerous times in presentations as we've moved forward over the last couple of years, especially since the Tubbs fire. So for us within the city, you could move to the next slide, please. What we chose to do was take that step at the local level to move forward an ordinance before council that would identify this area, the entire existing area within the LRA, from what was originally the very high fire hazard severity zone to what is now the wildland urban interface area of our community. So with that said, that gave us the ability for any new construction within those locations, they would have to conform to the more stringent requirements that are listed within the California Building Code, the California Residential Code, as well as requirements within the California Fire Code. And we felt, even though the environments in most of these areas are built out, we wanted any new construction within those locations to have to conform to these newer standards. Because prior to 2007, there was very limited enhancements to structures within those areas that would provide them survivability based on criteria in the California State Fire Marshal's directories that are listed materials for exposure to embers and fire exposure. So for us, we took that step, we established these boundaries, and we recognize these areas still of concern within our community. So again, I just wanted to provide that brief context to history for everyone so we understand how we've come to this point. For the next, I believe 5 slides, I will have Assistant Fire Marshal Lowenthal step in to provide additional information.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So where have we come in the last 10 years? For 10 years now, since 2010, been attempting to jumpstart our program. We have, as we've discussed in the last times before council, both during the CWPP, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan presentation, as well as other times in front of council, we've talked about the number of attempts we've made at securing grant funding. Unfortunately, we've had little success. We made several attempts to secure both pre-disaster mitigation funds, mitigation grant program funds, as well as CAL FIRE's climate investigation grant program. In addition to other grant programs, have all been unsuccessful to date. We were successful in 2015, the awarding of a grant for education for what we'll refer to in a few slides later as our phase 1 process. And that allowed us to do comprehensive education in 3 portions of our community. It was targeted in our Southeast Bennett Valley area, our Fountain Grove Hidden Valley area, Montecito, as well as Oakmont and Rincon Valley. Beyond that came the Tubbs fire in 2017. Following the Tubbs fire in 2017, we had 1 successful grant, and that was for the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan is really the backbone of what our needs are for specific to vegetation management. You've heard a lot about weed abatement from us over the last number of decades. Unlike weed abatement, the vegetation management program, it will be a year-round program. And with that, it's going to come a lot of efforts, a lot of needs, multiple components, as well as significant costs to get it where we need it. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan, comprehensive process that engaged both our department, our stakeholders, our county, state, federal representatives, as well as, most importantly, our community. The involvement of our community was pretty incredible, as well as the amount of feedback they provided. And I believe what was about a 60 to 70 question survey to really pull a lot of data and a lot of what they saw as the needs of our community out of it. Plan itself covered our community's overview. It defined what our wildfire problem was within the city, what our risks were to our wildland urban interface and around it, assessments of our city of fire hazards from the threat of wildfire, as well as, most importantly, the action plan, which you'll see in the presentation. Next slide, please. So, tailing off of the action plan really speaks to what the threats are to the city. So part of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan was looking at our city as a whole, and then looking at everything from the fuels, meaning the brush, the timber, the grasses, everything that makes up the area that we live in, which is a beautiful environment, but also takes into account climate change, our weather, historical data, all that gets generated into what we refer to as computer models. So the computer models ran hundreds and hundreds of simulations using all the different data points. The simulations looked at the potential impacts to our city from the threat of wildfire. One that we've seen historically is that Santa Rosa is on the receiving end of large-scale wildfires. We saw it during the Hanley fire. We've seen it during the Tubbs fire. We saw the threat to us from the Kincaid fire. Just yesterday, you saw the wildfire off of Ursuline Road, which was held at 12 acres. That area almost speaks and shows that how this map itself really does hit home the threat and how things can expand. So if you look up in that northwest portion of the map, you'll see the yellow and some of the green. And that area north of the city limits is where the fire started. And so we expect that yellow and green to be a lot of those seasonal grasses. Those seasonal programs is where that impact really made a difference. Those seasonal weed abatement programs are both in the city and outside the city because fire doesn't know boundaries. But where you start seeing it transition from those yellows to the different darker shades and the red is where we're getting into more of our vegetation and brush. And that is where we have that greatest threat. So you see the couple blotches of red. The red that you're seeing primarily above Beacon Valley and Skyhawk is the unburned areas between the Tubbs and the Nuns fire. So there is still a very significant threat to our community. We have seen a number of grass fires and vegetation fires burn within the footprint of the Tubbs fire. So that regrowth is already creating issues. But we're also seeing that in a lot of our neighboring counties. If you look at the fire history they've had in Lake County, which was kind of the Bay Area's first introduction to a lot of the large-scale wildfires following the drought in the early 2000s to mid-2000s. A lot of those areas are reburning and fires are burning into old footprints already. Much of that is due to the conditions that we're dealing with based on our climate. Next slide. So really the meat and potatoes of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan that kind of lays out the framework for our needs for a comprehensive vegetation management program came with 9 overall objections with 46 actionable items. It should be noted that the Community Wildfire Protection Plan is a 5-year plan. That'll kind of play into what you'll see in the next couple slides, but we understand that being able to accomplish all 46 actionable items is probably not going to happen. but we're going to definitely work to start tackling the projects that we can and then evaluate the needs in 5 years from now. So the first one, improving coordination and tracking. One of the things that the plan identified was the need to coordinate and track our overall needs within the city. Excuse me one sec. So many public and private entities are currently tracking their own actions to reduce threats of wildfire within our community. We're doing work, the county's doing work, our homeowners associations are doing work. So we determined that there was a need to have a central collection point to track and manage all that, so we understand what is happening, maintain a database that shows the work that's being done so that it can project and help us maintain our needs moving into the future. Number two, improve evacuation routes. The evacuation routes that we have throughout the city, you've seen a lot of the discussions that we've talked about in the Know Your Ways Out, most recently our evacuation zones. All those play into needs to improve the actual routes themselves. So doing fuel reductions along designated routes, both inside and outside of our wildland urban interface, are going to become critical. And it's not just one or two, it's that there's a number of them that we've identified. I will tell you that we have also, as of last week, gone ahead and made 4 additional attempts at notice of interests for both BRIC, the building resilience, as well as hazard mitigation grant monies. We've requested submitted 4 of those. So 2 under the mitigation and 2 under the building resilience within our community at both the state and federal levels. So we mirrored them. So 1 for improving evacuation routes and 1 for a wildland urban interface fuel reductions program. And we put those both into both programs to kind of see what sticks. One interesting to note that's kind of a new development that has played into a lot of our issues that we've had securing grants is the first question that we actually got back just following the submittal from Cal OES was actually asking questions regarding the monies that we received from PG&E. So that was kind of an interesting thing to see from the state as one of their first initial questions to us. The next item is educating the public on how to mitigate risks and damage to wildfires. Through the process, they evaluated our content, the information that we've had both on our site, the information that we provide into our community, and they've made recommendations on improvements that we can do that. One thing that was interesting was that only 14% of the 500 plus respondents that we had felt that they had adequate resources to better understand the threats of wildfire and how to mitigate them. Improve wildfire preparedness. Wildfire preparedness involves a range that includes multiple government agencies and non-government organizations. Creating connectivity between agencies and organizations can strengthen the community's response to wildfire. The increased structural hardening. So we have a number of homes within our wildland urban interface and around it, but most notably within, which is our concern, that do not have current wildfire protection hardened structures in place. So roofs, eaves, attic vents, windows, a lot of things that can help benefit the resilience to wildfires. We're looking at programs that will allow us to incentivize some of the structural hardening, understanding the costs associated with making improvements to the structure itself. Treating vegetation to reduce wildfire hazard. The wildfire hazard. So this is going to be a very complex program. I believe the mayor during the CWPP process had asked about the priorities of what we referred to as those compartments. The plan does identify a number of areas throughout the city that do need fuel reduction in order to help protect the city. With each one of those, within each one of those compartments, there's priorities. So the priorities have been established by the consultant through the development of the plan. The funds and ability to get in and treat those specific areas help us prioritize where we're going to start first. I mean, obviously, we've seen the threat to the north and northeast of our city and the areas that we described earlier. So that would probably be a prime candidate to focus on that, but also understanding that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in both the Oakmont, Bennett Valley, and Fountain Grove areas to maintain as well as improve our survivability from destructive fires in the future. Improve defensible space standards. Defensible space, home ignition zone concepts, and the city codes that we have are all intended to reduce the structural ignitability when applied. The CWPP survey responses showed a high percentage of respondents would support enforcement of defensible space requirements. So that's going to be key to us, and that plays into what our ultimate goal is not only educating, but enforcing here locally. Increasing staffing to address wildfire mitigation workload. We did just bring an item before you in the last few weeks that was specific to adding that additional limited term fire inspector for 3 years. What that allowed us to do was promote one of our inspectors to an assistant fire marshal. If you remember in the past from some of the other issues that we've talked about, I formerly managed the CUBA program, or Hazardous Materials Business Program for the city. That responsibility has been shifted to Kemplin Robbins, who has a tremendous amount of background in that program and will do a great job for our city, but it will allow me to now focus on the implementation of our needs related to vegetation management and the overall community wildfire protection plan for the city. The last item is consider expanding the designated wildland interface fire area to include other areas of the city not located within the WUI. That was something that did come up. We heard about that in a number of community meetings, primarily from Coffee Park residents. So it has been something that we have looked into. But also when we start looking at what the implications of that when it comes to insurance, which is a big issue that a lot of our residents that are already within our wildland urban interface are running into, being part of that designation, is a factor that needs to be considered before expanding the wildland urban interface fire area outside of his existing area. There's still things that we can do and that we can help educate our community on that can make improvements, and we have been doing that, especially with Coffee Park residents, talking about the mesh screens, limiting the amount of gorilla hair bark mulch immediately up against homes. So there's a lot of things that we will and continue to that we have been doing and will continue to educate our residents outside the WUI that they can do without actually officially being into it, which could have unintended consequences. Next slide. So over the last several years, we have been pitching and discussing a 3-year pilot program that would start with year 1, education and implementing of priority projects, year 2, education inspections with continued focus on those priorities, and then 3, the education enforcement, and then overall ordinance that helps maintain the needs. So we have made a few attempts at actually implementing that education, that phase 1, and kind of lost traction at that point, primarily due to lack of funding through grants that have really been designed to help carry us through those first 3 years. You've seen or heard us talk about, the different shipping programs, the different vegetation management, education, inspection, needs for staffing, needs for vehicles. A lot of those have all been submitted through grants and have not been successful. We have since then, obviously now created that new position. So the position is in place now. With the position, we budgeted and purchased the vehicle. So there's things that we've been doing with our existing budget to kind of try and help get us to where the foundation is there, but the funds to actually implement and do the work itself is what we're still working on. So the education and implementation of those priority projects was year one, and educating the people in the community within the wildlife interface on what they need to be doing and how they can be complying with a lot of the recommendations and requirements within the wildlife interface to create those defensible space zones, as well as improving their structure. So we'd move from education to actually conducting inspections. The inspections would be for the homes within the wildlife interface based on their education, but giving them something that actually is in the form of inspection and something that they can operate off of. And then 3 into it would then actually be enforcement. So enforcing what we educated them on, inspecting them on, we'd eventually turn that into an enforcement program through an ordinance that would be similar to what we're currently doing with our weed abatement ordinance, where the weed abatement is very specific. It's a seasonal program, whereas the vegetation management would be a comprehensive program that really dials in on protecting the structure, protecting our overall community, and would be supported by an ordinance. The 3-year program, after trying to implement it since 2015, we're now seeing that 3 years is not nearly enough, especially given what we're seeing following the recommendations that officially came out from the CWPP last month. So you'll hear Fire Marshal Moon with kind of where we're at with our philosophy and our thoughts today. Next grant. I wish there was next grant. Next slide. So the key actionable items from our community wildfire protection plan, kind of highlighting what we talked about a little bit. Most importantly, are listed in the next 2 slides, educating the public on how to mitigate those risks and damage from wildfires. So actually getting out there, talking to them, working with the homeowners associations, improving our content on our website, videos, updated information, just doing a better job of actually being able to educate the public on the needs of our community. Developing that GIS database to track the field treatments. Eventually, we're going to get funds, and we're going to need to and we'll be able to implement the work that needs to be done. But there's already work that's being done using, sometimes we've used the leftover funds that we have for our weed abatement, meaning that in the past, we currently use SAC, so supervised adult crews, to do our weed abatement work. That's seasonal grasses that are removed in large, open, undeveloped lands, as well as vacant parcels throughout the city. That's different than more of like the maintenance. I know Councilmember Sawyer and I have worked on a number of problems throughout the community on sometimes weed abatement, other times things that aren't necessarily weed abatement but fall under more code enforcement type issues. But the weed abatement, there's work when we're finished with that contract at the end of the year, we end up with some leftover funds, and we've been able to use SAC to go in and do field treatments. Sometimes we've got $5,000 left over, sometimes 10, but just chipping away. So that, as well as the work that our different associations are doing throughout our community, really needs to be tracked and matched into a database so we can see where we're making a difference and where we need to focus our efforts on. Improving the evacuation routes by performing field wheel treatments along the roadsides of the designated roadways. We now experience a lot of large-scale evacuations within our community. Unfortunately, we still have more fire season to go. Hopefully, it won't get to what our concerns have been year after year, but we need to improve our evacuation routes, and we need to maintain them for quite some time and into the future. So with that, like we discussed a little earlier, we have submitted 2 grant applications to try and kickstart that. Develop an ordinance and permitting guidance to allow burn piles under specific criteria for fuel reduction. We do plan on hopefully bringing that ordinance to you this fall that will potentially allow us to burn potentially by the end of winter so that we can do some work this year. That has predominantly come following the Tubbs fire. There were a lot of fuels that were removed, deadened down trees, brush that need to be removed, that we're seeing a lot of our open spaces. And after hearing from our homeowner association, there's really no good way to get a lot of that fuel out. And there's no way to do it without, in some cases, literally flying it out, which is not going to be practical. So allowing burning under specific conditions, very specific conditions within our wildlife interface is something that we plan on bringing forward to you. And that's not just somebody that's got 1/8 of an acre or 1/10 of an acre. And just because they live in the wildlife interface, it's going to be more geared towards larger parcels. Next slide. Develop the defensible space enforcement program. So that's one of the items that we talked about a little earlier, but we find as a key actionable item, because really we can make all the recommendations that we want and we can educate as many people as we want, but we're not going to hit everybody and we're not going to get everybody interested. But we can't have one person suffer for another person's lack of interest or just lack of not caring. We have seen that. We've seen it during the weed abatement program, and that's why we have an ordinance in place to deal with property owners that are not responsive and not really taking responsibility for their own parcels. So similarly, we're looking at developing and eventually following education and inspection, ultimately an enforcement program that will greatly improve the safety within our community. Treat vegetation within the wildlife interface following the priorities used in the plan. Outreach to additional homeowners association and individuals within the designated fire areas, assist in planning and implementation of the treatments. We're fortunate right now to have Daisy Vargas to assist with that. Unfortunately, right now, that is only a 2-year limited term position. And we are about 6 months to a year into it. So hoping to eventually also get that position full-time or extended, because there's as you've seen, a lot of outreach and a lot of needs that are going to be involved in this plan to make these actionable items effective. And then we created a new full-time position within the fire department to allow the program to move forward, to help work with Daisy, as well as the inspector that we're going to be hired to start coordinating our activities, working with the community groups, and ultimately really implementing the actionable items throughout the plan. Next slide. And now back to Fire Marshal Moon.
All right, thank you very much. This kind of brings things to a culmination here. Assistant Fire Marshal Lowenthal touched on a number of the strategical steps that we have taken in an effort to put ourselves in a position to really take action on what's been identified through the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. We have this opportunity currently to either place that plan on the shelf and say, hey, great job, we put a plan together, or we stand up and we take action. And we realize in our community, this plan falls in alignment with the objectives as well as the policies that are laid out within the general plan, the local hazard mitigation plan, and the Santa Rosa Fire Department strategic plan. So we find ourselves at this crossroad, because this will seriously be a very heavy lift. There's no way around it. The amount of area that occupies our community, 30% of our community being located in the wildland urban interface, that is a huge percentage. And knowing that the impact to our community is much greater than just that 30%, we can devise a plan now that we feel, based on those actionable items, can be extremely beneficial to the community. And we know that if we put these steps in motion, as we identified a pilot 3-year plan, we realized the Community Wildfire Protection Plan in and of itself is a 5-year document that has a life of 5 years, to where the intention is after that time, you will revisit the plan year 4 and prepare for adjustments to that plan moving forward. So the hope would be that at that 5-year mark, we're ready to develop a new plan that looks at those actions that we have taken as a community, and we can make that plan more streamlined from what it was because of the steps that we have taken. the actions that we take now will set us up for a much better success rate moving forward. And therefore, we kind of envision this, or should I say, provided you this vision and proposal that we realize our success rate with grant funding has been less than stellar over the last 10 years. When we look back and we find that we've received 2 grants out of probably over 20 that we have submitted for the purpose of development of a vegetation management program, that's not a very high percentage rate to help us move this very large, heavy, arduous task forward. So at this point in time, we just wanted to make sure we provided you with the information that breaks down, again, that brief history to help you understand how those areas were developed, the actionable items that we feel through that community-based and stakeholder-based both bring us to this point of recognizing this as an opportunity to step forward and to implement a plan that provides the community with the best actions that we can take based on scientific data, as well as input, again, most importantly from the community to drive this forward. So at that point in time, I'd just like to say thank you again very much for the opportunity to present this to you. And we would look forward to any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you for that presentation. As soon as there we go. So I'll bring it back to the subcommittee. Let's start with Vice Mayor Fleming. Any questions of staff on that presentation?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff, for that excellent presentation. I have a question about the SAC crews, and given the situation with COVID, do we have access to those crews during this season, or have people been released from the system and therefore unavailable?
I'll let Paul jump in that. He's been dealing with them the most over this COVID time, and we'll have the best response for you.
Thank you.
Yes, so for historical background, we did used to use private landscapers for our weed abatement. We switched to SAC ultimately because it was very costly, and we were using services from well outside of our city limits. We weren't actually able to get contractors to bid it here locally, so we were using some larger companies from out of Sacramento. Based on those costs, we switched to SAC, I believe, 3 years ago now. And it has been very cost effective for our needs here locally. The issue that we ran into at the beginning of the season was our inability to get going due to COVID. So what they did was they switched over from utilizing supervised adult crews to their own staff. And so their staff made up their workforce for a good part of the season. With that, we have run into some issues that we're working on regarding some increased costs related to that route. So that's something we're working on, but they have been able to meet our needs this season. Ultimately, yes, with the pandemic.
And just to be clear, when we say supervised adult crews, we're talking about incarcerated individuals?
These are people that have nonviolent activities where they're on work release for probation. And so they're the ones that are doing the work through county probation. So they're not the type of crews that are being guarded by law enforcement. We have utilized in the city in the last couple of years CAL FIRE's crews to do work and fuel reduction within Santa Rosa. With that, it's actually in some cases not possible, believe it or not, because they do have very specific requirements based on the nature of some of the offenders that they have on those crews, with having them into close proximity of residences. So we've tried using the inmate crews for some fuel reduction up in Skyhawk, and they weren't able to accommodate it, but they were able to do some work for us in other areas in the city. But we have used SAC, their supervised adult crews, to do fuel reduction in Santa Rosa, as well as for weed abatement. And they're almost like what you see sometimes on the side of the highway. It's just a supervised adult crew in probationary activities.
I appreciate your explaining it. I think I'm going probably in a little bit of the opposite direction of where you were going with it, which is that, wanting to make sure that these crews are, one, making our minimum wage, which we passed and have implemented in the city of Santa Rosa, and that we're not exploiting largely, Black, Indigenous, people of color to do our work at lower cost savings or at cost savings for us. While I do appreciate that budgets are tight, I really have some concerns about that program and want to make sure that it's evaluated through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion going forward. And so I'm sure that you guys have already thought of that and are trying to figure out if that remains the right thing to do. And hopefully, if that is what we do, that we give those folks who are, non-violent offenders and people who are appropriate the opportunities after they finish their probation to become regular members of our fire service as appropriate and as they might qualify for it based on, the testing and requirements and so forth. The other thing that I wanted to pivot to, unless you wanted to respond to that, didn't want to just put that out there and not give you the chance to respond.
No, I mean, I can. It's something we could definitely look into again. I know that, like I said, we did make several attempts to get local responsive bidders to handle the weed abatement contract here. And we ended up with a company out of Sacramento called SBI, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. It did below our budget. And there, at that time, the recommendation was to find something that was more cost effective given the needs. And the county does have a supervisor. The idea behind it is that they do have to provide opportunities for those people to do hours for their probation purposes. And so they do typically do a lot of the work around the community, both in our creeks, our roadways, as well as in this particular case, our weed abatement program. Sometimes those crews also have hours that they give to Board of Supervisors. So Board of Supervisors have the opportunity also to utilize those crews for different projects in their different districts. And we've actually historically have an opportunity every once in a while to use them for some projects here as well.
Yeah, I have one more question following on to that, which is, do the SAC crews draw from both the male and female probation and inmate populations?
They do.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. And then regarding the grant application challenges that we've had, is there anything that the council can do in terms of political efforts or staffing support to improve our outcomes on our grant applications?
We would always we always appreciate the support and letters. I will tell you that we have had letters of support, both at a congressional and Senate level, as well as lobbying done back in DC, and it hasn't worked to our advantage to this point.
Well, it'd be interesting if it's not onerous to have some sort of specific set of roadblocks that we're hitting in our grant application process. And so if there's any way that we can figure to support you or work with our city manager and your chief to see if there's anything that we can do to improve that outcome, because I know it's likely to do with the quality of the grant application. In many of these cases, it has to do with the size of the jurisdiction or various local match issues. So please do keep us informed and let us know what we can do to assist. And that's all my questions.
Thank you very much, Victoria.
Mr. Sawyer, any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate my colleagues' questions, and I had a couple, but because of the comprehensive nature of the presentation, they were ultimately answered. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just following up on the grants or the lack of success we've had for the grants, because I know on the some of the public safety grants I've seen, Santa Rosa had competed for some violence reduction grants. And quite frankly, we weren't that successful because we were not and are not experiencing the levels of violence that maybe other communities were experiencing. And that's where those dollars were going. Do you have an assessment as to why we haven't been that successful with the grants?
Well, one of the things that Paul touched on is we have moved forward using our existing budget to help purchase a vehicle. We've also had the recent ask to add an additional staff member. Those are items that we have had to put forward in grants previously that we have heard have been negatives toward our proposal. However, sitting in my position, I need to ask for all of those pieces in order for us to move forward a program. without any one of those pieces, we don't have a program. So it's been very difficult to apply for these grants and have all these asks and have a good program that accompanies them. But when we compete against other agencies that are just putting forward a program because they have the other pieces already, we found ourselves to not be successful. And I think what was very beneficial for us when we wrote the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, I can remember very vividly working on that frantically in December of 2017 after the fire with other city staff members to try and put that together and get it forward. And I think based on our current condition, we did receive success for support of that grant. Again, that was to prepare the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So there's some variables that I think have been negatives for us. But again, I feel wholeheartedly that I need to move forward all of those asks within a grant proposal. Otherwise, I'm not going to be successful, or I'm going to be scrambling to try and find those other pieces and maybe not meet the objective of the grant.
And I will add, I don't think there's any question as to whether or not, from what we're seeing here locally, that the threat of the wildfire doesn't exist, right? And so, like as Fire Marshal Mill was indicating, the plan itself lays that out. And we really made sure that when we submitted these last 4 notice of interest last week, that we really highlighted that the plan is in place now, hoping that that would be what would propel us. I'll be honest, it was just a little disheartening that the first question that we got back from Palo was on the status of our settlement with PG&E. But when you think about the fact that when they sent their reminder notice to us that the grant application was due at Friday at 11:59, and typically they blind copy the participants. In this case, they didn't. And so to see that there was about 185 people on that email list, that first notice of interest, kind of gives you an idea of how many people are are not people, but agencies are competing for that pot of money.
Yeah, I recognize it as a very competitive environment. And I would just echo comments of other subcommittee members about if there's anything the council can do to support your efforts, including talking to our lobbyists in DC or Sacramento, please don't hesitate to ask the city manager or ask us. So I don't have any additional questions. So why don't we're now taking public comment on item 5.2, Santa Rosa Fire Department Vegetation Management Plan. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes. Madam Host, would you facilitate public comment for item 5.2, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As Mayor stated, dial *9 to make a public comment. And as you can see, a timer has appeared before you for the convenience of the speaker and the viewers.
Así como he visto, hay un número donde se le puede decir la cantidad de tiempo que puede tener haciendo la pregunta.
Thank you, Xiomara. Pablo is interpreting over on the Spanish channel, and once we have public commenters who want to participate, they will indicate that they need interpreter services from here. So I will get through the public comment period, and I will ask you to activate your microphone as needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any hands being raised, Mayor. Again, if you want to make a public comment on item 5.2 for the vegetation management presentation, please raise your hand. Mayor, seeing no public comments from Zoom, are you okay if we move on to the voice message and e-comments?
Absolutely, thank you.
And I should have just announced that we did not receive any voicemail public comments, nor did we receive any email public comments on this item. And that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you. Chief, could you just reframe, because you had made a reference of what do we want to do with this plan, sit it on the shelf for action, make actions. Could you reframe, do you have any specific feedback that you would like from this subcommittee before we move to our next item?
I think in closing, I would just like to say, I realize this is a big ask, but we put forward this 5-year focal point, knowing that the plan has a life. And what we have come up with would be to look at, from a dollar perspective, a $5 million ask with a $250,000 component going toward the development of a new community wildfire protection plan at the end of that 5 years. And the plan would be that each year we come before council to provide an update, a status, if you will, of what actionable items have been completed and what progress is taking place. And we realized through some of these actionable items, there are a number of different contracts that will need to be established in order to help us achieve the result that we are hoping out of these actionable items. So what we would look at, we kind of just put it in a box and said, okay, here's where we find ourselves. Realistically, if we took that 5-year vision and we try and accomplish the different items that have been set before us through this process, that would be the ask that we move forward. And when the appropriate nature for that to be presented, I don't know when that would be, but to share that with you as the Public Safety Committee, that would be our focus as we move through these next 5 years, is that we would seek funding to help support that. And we're looking, as I said, it would be $5.25 million to establish the structural framework to allow us to implement those particular actionable items.
Okay. So with that as a start, we'll, Mr. Sawyer, I'll start with you. Do you have any comments or feedback on our vegetation management plan and the presentation?
No, other than to say that to highly regard that request for finances for such an important program, I think deserves a fair amount of council discussion. Given that the monies that came from PG&E, for instance, were based on losses due to fire, it would be hard to ignore this request. But I look forward to that conversation with the rest of the council.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Fleming?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that this is one of the most important and existential, this and climate change and our economy couldn't be of greater concern to the viability of our community going forward. And I look forward to hearing the entire council's response on this body of work that you've done. Appreciate all of the service that you're providing to our community and helping to keep us viable going forward. It's really scary stuff. So thank you.
And my feedback was, so much work has gone into this and we do need to implement it. So I would ask that however we're going to have to pay for it, obviously we have October 8th, our long-term financial planning subcommittee will be talking about community feedback for PG&E settlement dollars. And I believe we're going to council on October 27th or 28th, whatever the Tuesday is.
27th.
So I would please ask that this information be presented to the whole council as an option about, here's the plan, here's the costs, what do you want us to do? Because I'm very supportive, as my colleagues mentioned, this is one of the most important things I think for us to do for the healthy future of Santa Rosa. So
great. Thank you all very much for the feedback and for the time to provide this information.
Great. Okay, that's the end of item 2. Dina, do we need to take a quick 5-minute break for the translators, or can we go to 5-3?
We can do a brief transition, maybe 5 minutes, and that way I think we can forge through the remainder of the meeting without having another break needed from the translator side or interpreter side.
Okay, great. We will recess until 11:30. Recess till 11:30. Thank you.
Thank you, interpreters. I'm going to disable the interpreter function for a brief moment in order to allow the interpreters to transition into different roles. One moment, please. Okay, Xiomara, I have now put you on the Spanish channel. Can you please briefly turn on your camera and just give me a thumbs up that you are able to interpret on the Spanish channel? Xiomara, can you turn on your camera just and give me a visual thumbs up that you are on the Spanish channel? In the meantime, Pablo, can you just give me a brief mic check that you are here on the panelist side?
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Thank you. Xiomara, can you turn on your camera briefly and give me a thumbs up that you are good to go on the Spanish side? Pablo, you are okay to mute your mic for now. I'm just going to connect to the meeting and see if I can see Xiomara or hear her on the Spanish channel. One moment, please.
Great.
Xiomara, can you please confirm that you are on the Spanish channel?
Yes, I am in the Spanish channel.
Okay, thank you. I connected to the Spanish channel. I can hear you fine. We are on a brief recess until 11:30. So once we get back to the meeting, if you can engage in interpreting on the Spanish channel. Thank you very much, Xiomara.
No problem.
Xiomara, please be sure to mute your mic until the meeting starts back up. Thank you. Mayor, we are all set. The interpreters are in place.
All right, thank you. We'll reconvene the subcommittee meeting. Could you please do a roll call?
Happy to. Councilmember Sawyer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fleming. Vice Mayor Fleming. Mayor Schwedhelm.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fleming. All members are present with the exception of Vice Mayor Fleming.
All right, thank you for that. On to item 5.3, Chief Navarro. It's my understanding you'll be making this presentation or introducing it.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm my computer's flickering on and off. So can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I lost you for a second, so I apologize. So yes, thank you very much, Rainer Navarro, Chief of Police. I am here and I'm going to be presenting our 3 agenda items. 2 of them should be fairly quick. They're just very quick updates regarding some items that are going to be coming up in the future. That's the after action report and also the mental health reform. And then the 3rd item, it's actually going to be 5.4 is going to be our 2019 data, which we were not able to get to last month due to some time constraints. So the first item, if we can go to the next slide, please, will be on our after action review and our timeline for that. So I wanted to give you a quick update on the after action review. We did go to an RFP and the after action report was awarded to Hillard Hines LLC. The RFP process was completed back in August and through September. They have been working on reviewing the documents. The Hillard Hines is a group, it's a risk management firm, and it has experience in risk management, investigations, and law enforcement best practices. So next week, they're going to be coming to Santa Rosa, and they're going to be doing a site visit here at the Santa Rosa Police Department and in the city. So they'll be working on that next week. And then the goal is to have a draft draft report ready to review by the end of October. And then in November, the report will come before this board or this committee for review and comment. And then we anticipate bringing the after action review report to the whole city council in December. So that was just a quick overview of the timelines, and we'll be getting you'll be getting more information in November, in-depth dive into their findings in the fall. And that is all I have on that item. Do you have any questions?
Great, thank you for that. Let's go to my subcommittee members. Mr. Sawyer or Ms. Fleming, do either of you have questions regarding the timeline for the after action report?
No questions.
I do not. Thank you, Chief.
And nor do I. So we are now taking public comment on item 5.3, the Santa Rosa Police Department after action review timeline. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes. Madam Host, would you please proceed with facilitating public comment on item 5.3?
Thank you, Mayor, will do. As you can see, there is a timer up for the convenience of the speakers and the viewers participating via Zoom. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you are invited to do so. Your microphone will be muted at the end of your countdown timer or at the conclusion of your comment. If you're participating in the meeting from the Spanish channel in Zoom, we have an interpreter on standby on the main channel to assist you during public comment. If you wish to make a public comment, please be sure to pause throughout your comment to allow for interpretation. Those using interpreter support will be afforded additional time for your public comment as required by the Brown Act. For Spanish speakers, at the time you hear your name called, turn off the Spanish channel to make your public comment. This icon may now look like a circle with an ES in the middle and the word Spanish underneath. The first public comment will be from Colin. Colin, I have enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your mic and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
Hi, I can see the timer. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Please identify yourself for public record if you so choose, and your time begins now.
Hi, my name is Colin Metcalf. I'm a lifetime resident of Santa Rosa. I guess this is a little late to be asking this question because it sounds like you've already assigned an organization to be doing the after action report, which I'm very much looking forward to reading. I heard a lot about the way Santa Rosa police responded to those protests, and it did not sound to me like it was a good situation. So I'm excited to hear what the analysis is going to be. My main question was, who decided who gets to do this after action report? Was this Chief Navarro's recommendation that this organization be picked, or did City Council come in and say, here's who you're going to use? I'm just curious as to who's deciding who investigates who. I would not be pleased to hear that Chief Navarro decided this and said, like, we're investigating ourselves. So that's my main question. I'd like to know that if somebody can answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. The next public comment will be from Daniela. Daniela, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen.
I can.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for public record if you so choose, and your time begins now.
Okay, my name is Daniela Delario, and I just wanted to piggyback on what Colin said. I am also interested in whether this is a police organization investigating the SRPD. I have been just looking into a little bit effective oversight and best practices of oversight of the police. And from what I've seen, what other places are doing, and really the best practices across the country are that we have independent community oversight of the police rather than, a police organization investigating another police organization. So I am curious, but I'm really happy to see that there will be an after action report, and I wanted to just thank you. But again, I hope you can address our questions. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniela. The next public comment will be from Roman. Roman, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
I can see it.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for public record if you choose, and your time begins now.
Hi, Roman here. Regarding the after action report, I read through the RFP, and it required this organization to sign a confidentiality agreement. I know there's a class action lawsuit against the police department surrounding their actions the first week of June. And then it also stated that the Santa Rosa Police Department and I think the city manager are allowed to omit certain things from the after action report before it's actually addressed by the public. So that doesn't really scream transparency to me. I am looking forward to what they find, but I'm worried that this is just going to be used for Santa Rosa Police Department to learn how better to quell dissent on taxpayer dollars, which this wasn't really touted as that when it was brought up initially. So yeah, I have a few problems with it, but looking forward to it being discussed in November or December. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. Okay, seeing no additional hands raised, I'm going to move along to voice message and email public comments, which there were none, Mayor. And that concludes public comment for item 5.3.
Great, thank you for that. Chief Navarre, could you explain, because I know you used the term RFP, which not everyone would be familiar with, but could you explain the process, what the city process of an RFP is to select the contract?
Yeah, so the request for proposal goes out for to solicit groups or organizations to come in and do what a specific scope of work that we're asking for. In this particular proposal, we were looking for basically an after-action report similar to what we have done in the past with the fires. How are we responding? Are there ways that we can improve our response? There is a separate investigation that is going on that is regarding the other personnel issues and the lawsuits. So this is an after-action overall review of our response to the incident. And what happens is we put together a group of people, of stakeholders, to look at the proposals that come in. And in this incident, or this proposal, we included the city attorney's office, an outside city manager, a city council member, members of the fire department, and city exec staff, and one of my executive staff was on the panel. And so the Hillard Hines was selected from those panelists and moved forward with the contract.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And is Hillard Hines, are they civilians or sworn law enforcement officers?
They are not a law enforcement entity.
Right.
So they're the group of attorneys, and there are retired law enforcement as part of that, to bring along some of the expertise and understanding of what happens. But they are a group of attorneys and people who look at best practices, risk management and mitigation, and understand not only just law enforcement, but risk management as a whole.
Great, thank you. John or Victoria, do you have any additional questions for the chief? All right, thank you, Chief. We'll now go to item 5.4, the Transparency 2019 data. Chief, you're back on.
Yeah, thank you. So we can go to slide 4, please. Thank you. So we, transparency has been at the forefront of our conversations over the last several months. And as you recall, our first public safety subcommittee meeting, we did a huge presentation on our use of force policy and some of the changes that were taking place. So this particular portion we were gonna touch on last month, and we were unable to do that due to some time constraints. And so today we're going to be discussing the transparencies as it relates to our stats and data for 2019, including our calls for service, our arrest data, and our use of force data. I do want to remind the public that we have created a website and that is more accessible and easier to navigate. You can find it, the website is on our slide deck right there, but if you just type in srcity.org/change for the better, that'll take you directly to the website, and that has detailed data, has notable cases that we have, our annual reports and press releases from the past. 2019, we did not do a annual report. Part of that was due to the significant events that were going on at the end of 2019 and the health emergency that we slid into very early on in the year. And so, what we've done is taken the data that we usually put into our annual report and we put it onto our website. So as you can see on this first slide, in 2019, our dispatch handled over 255,000 calls for service. Those calls for service are broken up into different areas. So we about 75,000 calls for service were related to 911 calls. So they were 911 calls coming into our dispatch center for those significant emergencies. There were about 137,000 calls for service that were not 911 calls. And the remaining 45,000 calls or so are calls for service that they're dealing with up in dispatch. So those are calls that they're getting that are, they may be questions, they may be other law enforcement agencies calling us to verify information. It may be calls that our dispatchers are making out to other agencies to verify wants and warrants. It could be calls for assistance for tows, for accidents, that sort of thing, and call transfers to Redcom or other agencies. So our dispatch center stays very, very busy throughout the year. Of those 255,000 calls for service, dispatch sent our patrol staff to 137,000 calls for service during 2019. The calls for service, we break those up into different priorities. Those priorities range from priority 1 all the way down to, I believe there's 12 or 13 different priorities, but we usually focus on the top 3 priorities when we talk about our calls for service. So the first priority is priority 1. That's our emergency situation. So that's a crime in progress. It could be a stabbing or a medical emergency, or where there's a life in danger or a shooting, that sort of thing, or a significant fight. Priority 2, or our priority 1 calls, our response times, we averaged about 6 minutes and 48 seconds to respond to those priority 1 calls in 2019. Our priority 2 calls, those are suspicious circumstances. It could be, somebody calling up about a suspicious vehicle in the area, a vehicle that's not seen too often, or suspicious persons that may be in the area. Sideshows have been garnering a lot of attention recently, and we had a lot of sideshow events in 2019. That is also in our priority 2 responses. And when our supervisors see the priority 2 responses and those sideshows, they will try to address those as timely as possible to get our officers to those calls. Our responses for priority 2s average about 12 minutes and 33 seconds. And then our priority 3 calls, those priority 3 calls are usually something that's already happened. So a lot of times somebody will come out of their house and they will find a theft or a burglary of their vehicle. And we called it a cold burglary or a theft. And those are usually labeled as priority 3s. And we averaged 25 minutes and 38 seconds to those calls for service. We utilize civilian personnel as much as we can through the use of community service officers and field evidence technicians to handle some of the priority 3 calls and to help our sworn staff to respond to the priority 1 and 2 calls. Our arrests, we had about 9,000 arrests in 2019, and we had about 6,500 citations that were issued in that year. Also keep in mind, during 2019, at the end of 2019, we had the Kincaid fire and we responded to evacuate approximately 60,000 of our residents on the west side of town. The month of October and November was, there was a decrease in calls due to the reduction of community members within our city. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. On the previous slide, there was arrests. It showed the use of force that was used during arrests. So of the 9,000 arrests that we did, that we made, there were 213 of those arrests that resulted in use of force. On this particular slide, what you can see is that this is an overview of our use of force data. And again, this can be found on our santarosa.org/change for the better. There were 235 incidents resulting in use of force. There's a difference in number between the number of arrests used and the number of incidents. And that's because some incidents result in, are from mental health responses, going to 5150 calls, and that sort of thing. And so they're not always charged. They may be going to they may be placed on a 5150 hold. So that's the difference between the 213 on the slide prior and the 235 here. We had our officers were involved in use of force incidents 411 times. Again, that's you may have an incident where you have multiple officers on scene addressing the incident. We had 34 officers that were injured during 2019 during use of force incidents, and there were 242 citizens who were involved in these incidents, and 84 community members were injured during our use of force incidents. Some of the reasons for using force during these calls for service, as you can see, there were 4 where they were assaulting someone else, 26 where they were assaulting an officer, an officer's on a call, and the suspect begins to assault the officer, and so use of force was used. Harming oneself, again, that's usually a mental health, or it's a mental health call. Damaging property, where we get on scene and somebody's damaging property and resisting arrest. 21 of those use of force incidents are in progress crimes, and again, 163 of those are resisting arrest or detention, and 13 are threatening assault. The amount of use of force, again, or use of force, the way we gather that information is anytime there's some type of force that's used. One of the areas of use of force was carotid restraint. We did use carotid restraint 9 times last year, and as you probably remember, that is the carotid restraint is one of those uses of force that we have taken out of our use of force policy as of June. So we no longer have that as a use of force. Control holds, that is, when somebody is resisting and we have to grab onto somebody's arm or and put them into a control hold. We use control holds 79 times. We used our electronic control device, which is more commonly used, known as a taser, 26 times. These are some of the more notable uses of force that we've used. Canines, we deployed our canines 12 times, and so they apprehended 12 suspects as a result of either a bite or them being deployed and somebody giving up as a result of the dog being shown. We use maximum restraints, and those are, when somebody's kicking or trying to kick out the door of a vehicle, or assaulting an officer, and it becomes dangerous to transport somebody just in handcuffs, we will use maximum restraints. One of the things that we've done is we've changed our maximum restraints, and we're going towards what we call a wrap. And basically it's a device where we wrap the legs of a person so they can't bend and kick. And so we no longer have to, with that device, we no longer have to strap legs back to the waist of a person with a strap. So we now use this wrap, and it allows us to be able to sift somebody in a car normally. And then we've used personal body weapons. So again, that's when somebody, if somebody is assaulting us, we're not able to, they don't, instead of using a baton, they may use a hand strike or something similar to that. And we used a firearm one time, and the person was not injured during that use of the firearm. So the three basic takeaways for this particular portion of the presentation I want to provide is number one, de-escalation; number two, tracking; and three, data. So in our de-escalation, again, we strive for de-escalation in the field whenever possible, and that starts when our staff gets on scene immediately. We try to de-escalate situations through conversation to try to manage the situation without using force. And so we only use force as necessary. And again, one of those changes that we've made, significant changes, was removing the carotid from our use of force policy. We have our existing training. We use de-escalation. We provide de-escalation training in numerous areas, such as briefing trainings, our firearms training, our defensive tactics training. And so anytime we provide any of those types of trainings, we're including how do we de-escalate and how do we try to reduce the injury for both the officer and our community members. And we use our de-escalation to, again, in addition to the firearms training, our force options simulators and our tactical communication trainings that we provide. For tracking, we have a lot of numbers up here. We're always striving to improve in our systems, and so our IA Pro system, which we use to track our use of force, we use that to not only track the quantity of use of force, but also we use it to improve our training and internal investigations. We use when we have these use of force investigations, if we can identify an officer who might be using use of force more, a lot of times, or there's a specific situation where use of force is used, we can start training people, our staff, onto how to de-escalate better. And so we use our tracking system to better inform our training and to provide early intervention for our staff so we can be more successful as we throughout our careers. And then in our area of data collection, we are currently collecting this annually, but we are creating the ability to provide this data in a more timely manner. We are currently doing two things to do that. Number one, our staff is working on a new RMS system, which is really a county-wide initiative, and this new RMS system is going to help with improved collection and provide more timely data that we're going to be able to put onto our transparency website. And then the other thing that we're doing is our IT team is working with our staff on that RMS system project to work on a solution to provide a patch so that information can be downloaded on a more regular basis. And so we're hoping that that's going to become more timely, and it actually will become information that we'll be able to provide on our website on a daily or weekly basis. The other things that we're moving toward, and we had mentioned in the past, I just want to remind you of, is that the Racial Identity and Profiling Act it was initiated in 2015, and based on the size of the police departments, provides direction on when we are mandated to go to the RIPA Act and collecting that data. Again, we are supposed to be starting tracking in 2022. We have pushed to accelerate that timeline, and we're working with the county consortium right now to get that up and running. And we're fairly confident that we're going to be able to start. We're going to be able to start tracking in January of 2021. There is a lot of work being done to make sure that we can be consistent with the Department of Justice, and also to make sure that the Department of Justice is prepared to take on the information that we're going to be collecting, because they're still dealing with how to collect the information from some of our larger agencies throughout the state. So that's a brief update and overview of our use of force and how we are tracking things. And I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Just briefly, I know what it stands for, but for everyone's understanding, can you share what an RMS system is?
Yes, thank you. It's a records management system. So the records management system, we several years ago, we went to a county-wide system where the majority of the law enforcement agencies are using similar systems. So it's easier to write reports, get it to the district attorney's office, and so the RMS system is not only just reports, but it's also collecting the data. And so we've upgraded that system. We're in the middle of this project, and we're hoping to be, there's been some delays, and we are working with a vendor right now, and we should be coming to the end of that project by the end of the year or early 2021.
Great, thank you for that. All right, we'll start with you, Mr. Sawyer. Any questions for the Chief on this information?
No, thank you, Mayor. I thank you, Chief, for this data. It's always better to have more than less. So the more detail we can gain in the future, the better off we will all be. And I appreciate this effort. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Fleming, any questions?
No, Mayor, you asked the one question I had, which I did not already know the answer to. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you, the Chief.
Chief, the only question I had, I really appreciate all the information that's available on the website. And I find that it's really interesting, consistent with SB 1421. We have the cases there. Can you share with us how, A, those cases get there, and if a resident or community member is interested in another case, what process he or she could take to actually get more information on the case that's not listed on the transparency page?
Yeah, so we have a, so the 1421 outlines some of the transparency laws and mandates for us. And so basically, if there's a significant injury, that has to be pushed out per 1421, and we have certain timelines that go through that we have to abide by. And we also have AB 748, which is basically oversees when we have to push out our the body-worn camera footage. And so we will put that on the transparency website, and we will follow the California laws. If there's interest in another report or incident, there's a there's a Public Records Act request that can be put in, and we have one of our managers down in our records section handles that, and we work very closely with the city attorney's office to make sure that we're timely and pushing that information out when we need to. And then the only other thing, if I could just add on, the transparency website, I look at that as a living document. It really is something that we're always going to improve on, and we're going to be adding information on there as we go along. We know laws are going to change. We know the expectations are going to change, and we're going to, provide as much information as we can.
Great, thank you for that. I also appreciate the public records ask request. It's just a click away. So if one were to visit that site, I was impressed that you made it easy. You didn't have to go. Someone wanting more information wouldn't have to search throughout the city's website to find how do I get the Public Records Act request link. So thank you for that. Okay, with that, I will, we're now taking public comment on item 5.4, the Santa Rosa Police Department Transparency 2019 data. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes. Madam Host, would you please facilitate public comment on item 5.4?
Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor stated, please dial *9 to raise your hand in Zoom to make a public comment. Your microphone will be muted at the end of your comment or at the end of the countdown. If you are participating in the Spanish channel in Zoom, we have an interpreter on standby on the main channel to assist you during your public comment. If you wish to make a public comment, please be sure to pause throughout your comment to allow for interpretation. Those using the interpreter support will be afforded additional time for your public comment as required by the Brown Act. For Spanish speakers, at the time you hear your name called, turn off the Spanish channel to make your public comment. This icon will be at the bottom of your screen or on your screen and will look like a circle with an ES in the middle and the word Spanish underneath. The first public comment will be from Ramon, followed by Colin. Ramon, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
I can see it.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for public record and your time begins now.
Hi, so I'm looking at the 2019 data on the government website, and it does have a racial data. I'm wondering why that's not part of this presentation, especially since, racial justice is why we're all coming here for better practices. Our Black population currently sits around 9% of use of force cases, despite making up close to 2% of the population in general. I think that, we should be talking about this. They're actually the only demographic that's out of proportion in regards to use of force. So I think we need to admit that. Another thing is, I remember at one of this, I don't know if it was a city council meeting or a public safety subcommittee meeting, but we had that initial 147,000 calls that they responded to. And then at a later meeting, it was made clear that it was around 50,000, and we were all kind of surprised by that. And now it's back up to 147,000. So maybe I'm just misunderstanding how these calls are broken down. But yeah, I'm a little confused there. And then in light of the recent death of the Sacramento man having a mental break, he was tased by sheriff's deputies multiple times. I was wondering or hoping if Chief Navarro can, in the future, just tell us about the training protocols around tasers, especially multiple deployments. There's a great documentary around how multiple activations of a taser has caused deaths, inducing cardiac arrest. And this company, Taser International, their defense for years has been, well, we can't prove the person didn't have a heart attack at the same time, coincidentally. So I'm just wondering if there is training around that, specifically about multiple deployments, because it is dangerous. And we just had it happen, in early August. And I know that's the sheriff's department, but, just for better practices around law enforcement in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next public comment will be from Colin. Colin, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
Yeah, I can see the timer. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please identify yourself for public record if you choose to do so, and your time begins now.
Hi, my name is Colin Metcalf. I won't go into the whole introduction. You've already heard me twice today. So while we were looking at the data, that little spreadsheet that we had up, I was surprised to see that, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be remembering the exact numbers wrong. It sounded like there were 26 assaults on officers that resulted in incidents of use of force. And overall, that 34 officers were injured during use of force incidents. So I would assume that 26 of those 34 injuries were from the assault on the officer. So I can understand that. So why then is the injury rate for the rest of us more than twice what it is for you? Like, I can understand using force in a situation where you have to defend yourself. I think anybody can understand that. But why more than twice the rate that you're being assaulted, you're assaulting members of the public? And I know that a lot of police officers talk about how their duty is to protect and serve. That does not seem like protecting and serving. That seems like not defensive behavior, but aggressive behavior. Two of those cases were to protect property. To protect property from what? You're hurting people on behalf of buildings? On behalf of things that cannot feel. 6 of those cases were situations where someone was harming themselves and you used force. I don't know if that's a restraint situation or if there are cases where you're inflicting significant injuries on people who are already struggling, people who are already suffering and trying to hurt themselves. I don't feel like hurting them is necessarily the best way to go forward with that. I'd really like to know why you're inflicting injuries on the public more than twice as often as you are receiving injuries from the public. That seems way out of whack. And also, like what Ramon said, there are members of the population who are being hurt and injured by the police at significantly higher rates than is commensurate with their demographic percentage. And I would like to see that addressed as well. I mean, ideally, there should be no use of force. But until we can get there, like, I would at least like to see a reduction. Some way to figure that out, I'm sure.
Thank you, Colin. Okay, Mayor, I'm seeing no additional hands be raised for public comment. There were no voice message public comments, nor were there any email public comments received on this item. And that concludes public comment.
Great, thank you. Bring it back to the subcommittee. Any additional questions for Chief Navarro? Vice Mayor, any questions? Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Chief, for that presentation. On to item 5.5. Chief Navarro, you're up again.
Thank you very much. So again, this is another quick update. We had a very in-depth presentation last month with Captain Cregan. Captain Cregan and our staff had done a lot of work in this particular area, reviewing and evaluating different models to respond to mental illness. And so we, based on last presentation that we gave, we heard from you, the subcommittee, and we focused our efforts on the CAHOOTS model and looking for a consultant to come in to assist us. So what we have been doing is working with CAHOOTS to try to get them into a professional services agreement. And I'm happy to say that we've been able to get a contract signed on our end, and we have sent it out for signature to have the agreement with CAHOOTS to come in to provide consultation over the next several months. So this is more about wanting to let you know that we have started the process. We are awaiting the final signature from CAHOOTS to come in and do the consultation and to provide a very brief timeline on what we expect it to look like. So between October and November, so the next 2 months, we anticipate having the consultant come down, which will be Cahoots, to provide meetings and planning sessions with city staff and stakeholders. Stakeholders will involve nonprofit organizations, community members, and also other jurisdictions. And we have been in discussions with, I myself have been in discussions with the other chiefs of police and the sheriff and Barbie Robinson over at the Department of Health on what we're trying to do here in the city of Santa Rosa. And so we have asked them to be a part of the stakeholder process and part of our meetings as we move ahead. And we're going to be sharing anything that we learn with our partnering jurisdictions throughout the county. So we hope to have that done in by November. We will be looking at December to have a RFP drafted, and the Cahoots consultant will help us draft that RFP, and we will be sending that RFP out for a selection process, much like we did with the after action report. We will have a panel to review the different RFPs that come in, and Cahoots will be a part of that, and we'll be able to select a nonprofit to lead our efforts in starting next year. So we hope to have that model ready and somebody selected to start this model, hopefully by May, and then be able to really push and implement this model and activate it for the fiscal year 2021. So again, we've had a lot of discussions about this internally with all of our staff. They're well aware of what steps we're taking. And I can tell you from the newest police officer all the way up to me, this is something that we all want and we're looking forward to have. And so we're anticipating and are actively anticipating and excited about this this new process and this new model that we hope to get started next year. So with that, I don't know if you have any questions on any of the timelines or what are the things that we've been doing here.
Great, thank you, Chief, for that presentation. And there we go. Mr. Sawyer, do you have a question or comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question, and it comes from some various community members, maybe 3 or 4 that have asked me the same question. And if this is premature, the answer that I'm looking for is going to be coming out of some of the work that you're doing with this model for the response to mental illness, which I'm very excited about because I think it's going to turn out to be a really important program for Santa Rosa. So their question is this, I'll just lay out a sequence of events. There is a call from someone who's concerned with an individual who is unfortunately suffering from some kind of mental break. They call dispatch. Dispatch assesses the situation and sends non-uniformed officers, or not officers, but people that are specially trained for dealing with people with mental illness that are having a break. As far as the caller is concerned, the person does not tend to be violent in any way. The responders come to help deal with the situation. They're in the bedroom of the person that's suffering from the mental break, and they reach under their pillow and retrieve some kind of weapon, potentially a firearm, a knife, whatever it might be. And then the question that comes from the community that I've probably heard it 4 times, is now what do they do? So my question is, if you're able to share how often that happens or has happened with the Cahoots program in what is the city that they're in Oregon or Washington. what's the reality of that kind of situation? How often are the non-sworn or non-weapon carrying respondents, how often are they in danger?
Yes, Councilmember, it's a very good question. So it's, I do know that based on the information that we've received from Cahoots and from the city of Eugene, Cahoots is in Eugene and in Springfield. And so we've, our main contact has been with the Eugene Police Department. They have told us that about 3 to 5% of their mental health calls for service are redirected to non-sworn personnel. So that would go, you know, so 3 to 5% of their calls for service are moved over to Cahoots. There is still a significant portion of mental health calls that they do go to. And so it is a successful program for them, and there's a lot of other cities throughout the nation that are implementing these. Some other agencies have implemented hybrids where, you know, they take a little bit from Cahoots and then they put it into it's more of a team effort with maybe an officer there. But if you look strictly at the Cahoots model, they're telling us about 3 to 5% of their calls for service are provided to Cahoots. Cahoots has provided information, and they said they've gone to about 15,000 calls. Those calls for service include mental health. They will do additional services that we already do not do. So there may be a transport. Maybe somebody needs someone in need may need a transport to a medical facility or something like that. My understanding is they do some of those. So, you know, if in the event they get into a situation where somebody who is not sworn go into a call and there's danger that's presented, you know, part of this is going to be training the civilian personnel on safety and when to call us and when to back out of a situation. You know, Cahoots has radios that they can communicate with our dispatch and our officers, or with their dispatch and officers. And so I foresee us having something similar to that. And then lastly, you know, again, the city of Eugene does respond to a lot of those calls still, and sometimes they'll go on their own and then they'll refer it back to Cahoots, or they will go together with Cahoots and then back out of it as soon as possible. So if there's any indication of danger, most likely a sworn officer will go to the call, hopefully together, and then we back out of it as quickly as we can.
Thank you for that, because the whole, you know, the hope is always that no one is injured in a situation like that, and having that kind of, you've just closed the circle for me, knowing that the officers responding always have the opportunity to call a member of Cahoots to complete the call, if you will, is a great answer to be able to provide, because it wasn't something that I could immediately respond to, because I had the same concern for obvious reasons. I mean, you never quite know what you're getting into until you're there. And even then, until the end of the call, you're never quite sure how it's going to end. And having that opportunity to, after the situation has been settled in a sense, having an opportunity to call Cahoots in to complete the call is a great way to answer that question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, we a lot of it's going to be training the nonprofit here. So you know, Cahoots won't actually run the program; they're going to set it up and help with the RFP. So it's going to be a local entity. And you know, one of the things that we have now is the mobile support team, which you know, doesn't have you know, it had been reduced in the past, but the practice now is, you know, when there is a response, you know, currently they don't want to respond unless there's a police officer there. So it's changing the mindset. Not only, it's not really changing the mindset just of the police officers, it's changing the mindset of everybody that's going to be involved, and how how to make sure you're safe when you do respond to these, and to de-escalate situations, which they are trained on, but I think it's just getting people used to responding without a police officer. So we're going to be working on that.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor Fleming, any questions? Great, and I don't have any either, Chief. I'm so anxious to see the implementation of this, and I'm really hopeful because this is just not a City of Santa Rosa thing. So I'm very encouraged that you and the other chiefs of the county are talking about this program, because I think it will be an improvement of the delivery of services for all of Sonoma County. So we are going to open public comment on item 5.5, Santa Rosa Police Department model for response. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9. You'll have 3 minutes. Madam Host, would you facilitate public comment on item 5.5?
Thank you, Mayor, will do. There is a timer before you for public comment. If you wish to make a public comment and you are participating on the Spanish channel in Zoom, we have an interpreter on standby, prepared to assist you for the public comment. For Spanish speakers, at the time you hear your name being called, turn off the Spanish channel to make your public comment. The first public comment will be from Colin, followed by Roman. Colin, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on your screen?
Hi, I can see the timer. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Please identify yourself for public record, and your time begins now.
Hey, it's Colin again. I'm really glad that you're moving forward, and it sounds like you've already signed a contract and you're preparing to move forward with the CAHOOTS implementation inside of the Santa Rosa city limits. It's a relief. I won't be fully relieved until it has been fully implemented, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how that changes the structure of community policing and the way we respond to the most vulnerable and marginalized populations in our community. I'm glad that you're supportive of it. I'd like to continue seeing that support. I think one way you can continue to show your support is in the meantime, until we have something like CAHOOTS implemented, not clearing any more encampments inside the city limits. It's been advised against by the health department. It spreads coronavirus potentially throughout the county. It makes it really difficult for people who need resources and services that are inside the city limits to continue to get those resources, to continue to be accessed by community members who want to do outreach to our houseless neighbors. If we can't find them, it's really hard for us to help them. And it's really hard for them to get help. And it's really hard for them to continue living. Like especially in the midst of fires for the last few years that have driven people out of their homes, that have destroyed people's homes, destroyed their lives, to come in to what they have made their new home and force them out it's inhumane. And I would like to see just a blanket halt on encampments for the rest of the time. I know the original time that you have Cancer Park, I was there for both clearings. I know your initial excuse was it's a fire hazard. And so then you push all of these people into a space that was half the size where they had to be crammed closer together. And then if I understand correctly, the second time it was, oh, it's concerned because of coronavirus, because they're living too close together, because they were forced to live too close together. And then you just cleared them out of Cancer Park entirely. We don't know where they are now. The other encampments have formed, we do know where they went, but it's infuriating and it's horrifying. And I don't think anybody wants to be there. At the last encampment that I was at encampment clearing that I was at, even the sanitation workers were like, we can't get in, we can't go in right now. It's just too awful. We don't want to do this. None of the officers who were there wanted to do it either. None of the people who were observing the clearing wanted it to happen. We just need to stop doing this to our neighbors. These are other people. These are human beings. Treat them like it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public comment will be from Roman. Romana, I've enabled your speaking permissions. Can you please unmute your microphone and confirm you can see the timer on the screen?
I see it.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for public record if you so choose, and your time begins now.
Hi, I just want to echo everything Colin said about the encampments. So regarding cahoots, Petaluma is also talking about this. Santa Rosa obviously wants it. And Chief Navarro brought up the mobile support team. It just got a boost in funding over the next 3 years and is able to expand its hours. I know the Santa Rosa Police Department benefits from this. And Barbie Robinson, as mentioned, is working to implement this through dispatch, the mobile support team. Sheriff Essick has been wishy-washy about his openness to this type of program, but I'm just wondering if there could be a more consolidated effort between the county and the cities if we're all moving forward in the same direction. Does it make sense to start completely from scratch when we already have a mobile support team in place and the director has expressed interest in moving towards a Kahoot style model? Yeah, and also I want to commend all of you for making this happen. Chief Navarro for backing it. This is a really beautiful thing, and I just want to extend my many thanks for putting this forward and supporting it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roman. Mayor, I see no additional hands being raised. We did not receive any voice message public comments, nor did we receive email public comments on this item.
All right, thank you very much. Any final comments, Mr. Sawyer, Ms. Fleming?
No, thank you very much, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Chief. On to item 6, future agenda items. Anything in particular that we need to add to this subcommittee's list of items from either of my colleagues on the subcommittee?
Not that I can think of in this moment.
Anything to add, Mr. Sawyer?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for everyone's participation in this meeting. Having no further items to discuss, we will adjourn the subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.